A millionaire silently watches as a little beggar is humiliated in his restaurant for not knowing how to read. The manager, rigid and prejudiced, mercilessly throws her out, ignoring the disapproving stares. But the businessman, deeply shaped by his own difficult past, decides to intervene in an unexpected way, and what he did left everyone stunned. The rain pattered relentlessly against the large windows of Elysium, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Inside, the warm glow of crystal chandeliers illuminated the faces of New York's elite as they savored exquisite dishes and engaged in hushed conversations. At a corner table, Gabriel Thornton, the restaurant's owner and a renowned businessman, sat alone, his eyes fixed on the street outside. Through the rain-streaked glass, Gabriel spotted a small figure huddled under the awning of a closed shop across the street. It was a little girl, no more than 7 years old, her tattered clothes clinging to her thin frame as she shivered in the cold. Her eyes darted hopefully towards each passerby, silently pleading for help, but most hurried past, eager to escape the downpour. Gabriel's brow furrowed as he watched the scene unfold. He had built his empire from nothing, clawing his way up from poverty to become one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. Yet something about this child stirred long-buried memories within him. As he observed, a well-dressed couple exited Elysium, laughing as they huddled under a large umbrella. The little girl approached them timidly, her hand outstretched. Gabriel couldn't hear what was said, but he saw the couple's expressions harden before they quickened their pace, leaving the child alone once more. Without fully realizing what he was doing, Gabriel rose from his table and made his way to the coat check. He retrieved his wallet from his jacket pocket and slipped out a crisp $100 bill. Then, ensuring none of his staff or patrons were watching, he quietly exited the restaurant through a side door. The cold rain immediately soaked through his expensive suit, but Gabriel paid it no mind as he crossed the street. As he approached, the little girl's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. Up close, he could see the dirt smudged on her cheeks and the way her teeth chattered from the cold. "Hey there," Gabriel said softly, crouching down to her level. "Are you hungry?" The girl nodded hesitantly, her eyes never leaving his face. Gabriel held out the $100 bill. "Here," he said. "Why don't you go into that restaurant over there and get yourself something to eat?" The child's eyes grew even wider as she stared at the money. Slowly, as if afraid it might disappear, she reached out and took the bill. "Thank you, mister," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Gabriel smiled and stood up, gesturing towards Elysium. "Go on," he encouraged. "Get out of this rain and fill your belly." As he turned to head back to the restaurant, Gabriel felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see the girl staring up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's not for me," she said, her voice trembling. "It's for my mama. She's sick, and we don't have any food at home." Gabriel felt his heart constrict. He knelt down again, meeting the child's gaze. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she replied. "Well, Lily," Gabriel said, "why don't you go into the restaurant and order some food to take home to your mama? I'm sure they can pack it up for you." Lily nodded, clutching the money to her chest. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice filled with gratitude. As Gabriel watched her hesitantly approach the grand entrance of Elysium, he felt a strange mix of emotions wash over him. He had given to charities before, made sizable donations to various causes, but this direct act of kindness felt different. It stirred something within him, a long-forgotten sense of connection to his own humble beginnings. Shaking off the feeling, Gabriel made his way back to the side entrance, unaware that his simple act of compassion was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not only Lily's life, but his own as well. As he slipped back into the warmth of his restaurant, he couldn't shake the image of Lily's grateful eyes from his mind. Inside, Gabriel discreetly made his way back to his table, nodding politely to a few regular patrons as he passed. He sat down, his clothes still damp from the rain, and found himself glancing towards the main entrance, waiting for Lily to appear. Minutes ticked by, and Gabriel's attention was drawn to the soft murmur of conversation and the clink of silverware against fine china. The familiar sounds of his successful establishment usually brought him comfort, but tonight they seemed hollow somehow. Just as he was beginning to wonder if Lily had lost her nerve, he saw her small figure push through the heavy glass doors. She stood in the entryway, wide-eyed and trembling, clutching the $100 bill as if it were a lifeline. The maitre d', usually so composed, looked visibly flustered at the sight of the bedraggled child in the opulent setting. Gabriel leaned forward in his seat, watching intently as Lily took a tentative step into the restaurant. He could see the other diners beginning to notice her presence, their conversations faltering as they turned to stare. Some wore expressions of pity, others of disdain, but most simply looked shocked to see such a stark reminder of the world outside their luxurious bubble. As Lily made her way towards the host stand, leaving small puddles in her wake, Gabriel saw his restaurant manager, Victoria Hawthorne, emerge from the back office. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene, her lips pursing into a thin line of disapproval. Gabriel felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew Victoria's dedication to maintaining Elysium's exclusive atmosphere, and he could already anticipate her reaction. Part of him wanted to intervene immediately, to stand up and declare that he had invited the child in, but another part, the businessman who had fought tooth and nail to build his empire, hesitated. He watched as Victoria approached Lily, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The other patrons fell silent, all eyes now focused on the unfolding drama. Gabriel held his breath, his hand gripping the edge of the table as he waited to see what would happen next. Little did he know that this moment would be the catalyst for a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, compassion, and the true meaning of wealth. As the rain continued to pour outside, the stage was set for a story that would touch hearts, change lives, and remind everyone involved of the transformative power of kindness. Victoria Hawthorne's perfectly manicured hand came to rest on Lily's shoulder, causing the little girl to flinch. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice saccharine sweet, but with an unmistakable edge. "But I'm afraid you've wandered into the wrong place. This is a fine dining establishment, not a soup kitchen." Lily looked up at Victoria, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. But I have money," she stammered, holding up the crumpled $100 bill. "A kind man gave it to me to buy food for my mama." Victoria's eyebrows shot up, her gaze flickering between the child and the money. For a moment, something like sympathy flashed across her face, quickly replaced by a hard, professional smile. "That's very nice, dear, but I'm afraid it's not that simple. Do you even know what kind of food we serve here?" Lily shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "Well," Victoria continued, her voice taking on a patronizing tone, "this is a very special restaurant for grown-ups. We serve things like foie gras and truffle risotto. I doubt you'd even know how to pronounce half the items on our menu, let alone enjoy them." A few chuckles rippled through the dining room, causing Lily to shrink back. She clutched the money tighter, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. From his corner table, Gabriel felt a surge of anger rising within him. He started to stand, ready to intervene, but found himself frozen in place as Victoria continued her public humiliation of the child. "Listen, sweetie," Victoria said, crouching down to Lily's level, her voice lowered but still audible to nearby diners. "I understand you're in a difficult situation, but this isn't the place for you. Even if you have money, you don't belong here. Why don't you try the diner down the street? I'm sure they'd be happy to serve you there." Lily's eyes welled up with tears, but she stood her ground. "Please," she whispered, "my mama's sick. I just want to bring her some good food to help her feel better." Victoria straightened up, sighing dramatically. "I'm sorry, but rules are rules. We have standards to maintain. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave before you upset our other guests any further." As Victoria reached for Lily's arm to escort her out, Gabriel finally found his voice. "Stop!" he called out, pushing back his chair with a screech that echoed through the now silent restaurant. All eyes turned to him as he strode across the dining room, his face set in a mask of barely contained fury. Victoria's eyes widened in surprise, her hand dropping from Lily's arm. "Mr. Thornton," she began, her voice honeyed once more, "I was just explaining to this young lady that—" "I heard what you were explaining, Victoria," Gabriel cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "And I'm ashamed that this is how we treat those in need at my establishment." He turned to Lily. his expression softening as he knelt beside her. "I'm so sorry about this, Lily. You are absolutely welcome here, and we'd be honored to prepare a meal for your mother." Lily's tear-filled eyes met Gabriel's, a glimmer of recognition sparking within them. You're the kind man from outside," she whispered. Gabriel nodded, offering her a warm smile. "That's right, and I meant what I said. You can get whatever you'd like here." He stood up, addressing the room at large. "This young lady is my personal guest tonight. I expect her to be treated with the same respect and courtesy we'd show any of our patrons." The restaurant erupted into hushed whispers. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of red, a vein visibly throbbing in her temple. "Mr. Thornton," she hissed, "a word in private, please." Gabriel ignored her, instead guiding Lily towards an empty table near the center of the restaurant. He pulled out a chair for her, helping her climb up onto the plush seat. "Now," he said, handing her a menu, "what would you like to order for your mother?" Lily stared at the menu, her brow furrowing in concentration. After a moment, she looked up at Gabriel, her eyes brimming with embarrassment. I can't read," she admitted in a whisper. Gabriel felt his heart break a little at her confession. He pulled up a chair next to her, acutely aware of the eyes of every patron and staff member on them. "That's all right," he said gently. "How about I read it to you and you can choose what sounds good?" As Gabriel began to describe the various dishes, simplifying the fancy descriptions into terms Lily could understand, he felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. It had been years since he'd taken the time to truly connect with someone like this, to see the world through the eyes of someone less fortunate. Across the room, Victoria watched the scene unfold with a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger. She had worked tirelessly to cultivate Elysium's reputation as the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and now her boss was throwing it all away for some street urchin. Her mind raced, considering the potential fallout from this incident. Regular patrons might be offended, negative reviews could surface, and their carefully curated image could crumble. As she observed Gabriel patiently explaining the menu to Lily, a plan began to form in Victoria's mind. If Mr. Thornton was going to let sentimentality cloud his judgment, perhaps it was time for a change in management. She had connections, after all, and there were plenty of investors who might be interested in buying out a successful restaurant, especially if its current owner was showing signs of instability. Meanwhile, at their table, Lily's eyes lit up as Gabriel described a hearty chicken soup. "That sounds perfect for Mama," she said, a small smile finally gracing her features. "And maybe some of that fancy bread you mentioned?" Gabriel nodded, signaling for a waiter. As he placed the order, ensuring everything would be packaged to go, he couldn't help but notice the mixed reactions from those around him. Some patrons were smiling, seemingly touched by the scene. Others wore expressions of clear disapproval, whispering behind their hands and shooting pointed looks in his direction. For a moment, doubt crept into Gabriel's mind. Had he made a mistake? Was he jeopardizing everything he'd worked so hard to build? But then he looked at Lily, saw the hope and gratitude shining in her eyes, and knew he'd made the right choice. As they waited for the food to be prepared, Gabriel engaged Lily in conversation, learning bits and pieces about her life. He discovered that she lived with her mother in a small, run-down apartment not far from the restaurant. Her father had left when she was a baby, and her mother had been struggling to make ends meet ever since. The story stirred something deep within Gabriel, echoing his own childhood experiences in ways that both comforted and unsettled him. When the food arrived, beautifully packaged in elegant takeout containers, Lily's eyes widened in wonder. "It smells so good," she breathed, carefully accepting the bag from the waiter. Gabriel walked her to the door, acutely aware of Victoria's glare burning into his back. As they reached the entrance, he crouched down once more to Lily's level. "You're a very brave and caring girl, Lily," he said softly. "I hope this helps your mother feel better." Lily nodded, clutching the bag of food to her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Gabriel," she said, her voice filled with sincerity beyond her years. "You're the nicest grown-up I've ever met." As Gabriel watched Lily disappear into the rainy night, he felt a profound sense of change stirring within him. He turned back to face the restaurant, knowing he would have to deal with the consequences of his actions. Victoria stood near the host stand, her arms crossed and her expression stormy. The patrons alternated between staring at him and pretending to be engrossed in their meals. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel straightened his shoulders and walked back into the dining room. He had weathered storms before in his business life, but somehow he knew this one would be different. The night's events had awakened something long dormant within him, and as he prepared to face the fallout, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Little did Gabriel know that his act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that would not only challenge his own beliefs and values, but would also expose long-buried secrets, test loyalties, and ultimately redefine success in ways he never thought possible. As the rain continued to pour outside Elysium's windows, the stage was set for a story of redemption, connection, and the transformative power of compassion in the face of adversity. The following morning, Gabriel Thornton sat in his home office, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold on his desk. The events of the previous night played on a loop in his mind, Lily's grateful smile contrasting sharply with Victoria's look of barely concealed fury. He rubbed his temples, feeling the first stirrings of a headache coming on. His phone buzzed insistently, a string of notifications lighting up the screen. Social media was ablaze with accounts of what had transpired at Elysium. Some praised his act of kindness, calling him a hero and a model of corporate responsibility. Others were less impressed, decrying the incident as a publicity stunt or a breach of the restaurant's standards. As he scrolled through the comments, a knock on his office door broke his concentration. "Come in," he called out, setting his phone aside. His personal assistant, Sarah, entered, her usually calm demeanor tinged with concern. "Mr. Thornton, I've been fielding calls all morning. The press is clamoring for a statement, and several of our regular patrons have expressed concerns about last night's incident." Gabriel sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What kind of concerns?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "Some are worried about the restaurant's exclusivity being compromised. Others are praising your actions, but wonder if this signals a change in Elysium's policies. And then there's Victoria," Gabriel finished for her. "Let me guess, she's not happy." Sarah nodded. "She's requested an urgent meeting with you and the board. She seems to think your actions might have implications for the business." Gabriel felt a flicker of irritation. He had built Elysium from the ground up, turning it into one of the most sought-after dining experiences in the city. And now, because of one act of kindness, everything was being called into question. "Set up the meeting," he told Sarah, "and draft a press statement. Sentiment behind your actions last night. I think it's important we discuss the potential ramifications for Elysium, and by extension, your entire restaurant group." Gabriel nodded, gesturing for her to continue. He noticed a few board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Victoria pulled out a tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "In the past 12 hours, we've received 17 reservation cancellations from our high-profile clients. Social media engagement is up 500%, but not all of it is positive. Several food critics have reached out, questioning whether this signals a change in our establishment standards." She paused, looking directly at Gabriel. "Furthermore, I've had to reassure our staff that this isn't going to become a regular occurrence. They're trained to provide a specific level of service to a specific clientele. Introducing unpredictable elements could seriously disrupt our operations." As Victoria continued to list off potential issues, from health code concerns to the impact on their wine program, Gabriel found his mind wandering. He thought of Lily, of the look in her eyes when he'd treated her with kindness. He thought of his own childhood, of the times he'd gone to bed hungry, of the shame he'd felt walking into fancy stores or restaurants. "Mr. Thornton?" Victoria's sharp tone snapped him back to the present. "Do you have anything to say about this?" Gabriel looked around the table, taking in the faces of people he'd worked with for years. People who had helped him build his empire, who had believed in his vision. And yet in this moment he felt a disconnect he couldn't quite explain. "I hear your concerns," he began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "And I understand them. We've worked hard to build Elysium into what it is today. But last night, when I saw that little girl standing in the rain, I was reminded of something I think we've all forgotten. He leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "We're not just in the business of selling expensive meals. We're in the business of creating experiences, of making people feel special. And yes, our typical clients can afford to pay for that privilege, but does that mean we should turn our backs on those who can't?" A murmur ran through the room. Gabriel saw a mix of reactions, some nodding in agreement, others frowning in disapproval. "With all due respect, Mr. Thornton," one of the older board members spoke up, "we're running a business here, not a charity. Our shareholders expect a certain level of return." Gabriel nodded, acknowledging the point. "I understand that. And I'm not suggesting we turn Elysium into a soup kitchen, but what if we could find a way to maintain our standards while also giving back to the community?" He turned to Victoria. "You mentioned our social media engagement is up. People are talking about us. What if we could channel that attention into something positive? A program to support local food banks, perhaps, or a mentorship initiative for aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds?" Victoria's expression remained skeptical, but Gabriel noticed a few board members nodding thoughtfully. "It's worth considering," another board member chimed in. "Corporate social responsibility is becoming increasingly important to consumers, especially younger demographics." As the discussion continued, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he was walking a fine line between maintaining Elysium's reputation and following his newfound conviction, but for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The meeting concluded with a tentative agreement to explore some community outreach options, though Victoria made it clear she still had reservations. As the board members filed out, she lingered behind. "I hope you know what you're doing, Gabriel," she said, her use of his first name underlining the seriousness of the situation. "You've built something remarkable here. It would be a shame to see it all come crashing down because of one impulsive decision." Gabriel met her gaze steadily. "I appreciate your concern, Victoria, but I think you're underestimating the potential here. We have an opportunity to redefine what luxury dining means, to show that true class isn't about exclusivity, but about how we treat all people." Victoria's lips tightened, but she said nothing more as she gathered her things and left the room. "Sentiment behind your actions last night. I think it's important we discuss the potential ramifications for Elysium, and by extension, your entire restaurant group." Gabriel nodded, gesturing for her to continue. He noticed a few board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Victoria pulled out a tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "In the past 12 hours, we've received 17 reservation cancellations from our high-profile clients. Social media engagement is up 500%, but not all of it is positive. Several food critics have reached out, questioning whether this signals a change in our establishment standards." She paused, looking directly at Gabriel. "Furthermore, I've had to reassure our staff that this isn't going to become a regular occurrence. They're trained to provide a specific level of service to a specific clientele. Introducing unpredictable elements could seriously disrupt our operations." As Victoria continued to list off potential issues, from health code concerns to the impact on their wine program, Gabriel found his mind wandering. He thought of Lily, of the look in her eyes when he'd treated her with kindness. He thought of his own childhood, of the times he'd gone to bed hungry, of the shame he'd felt walking into fancy stores or restaurants. "Mr. Thornton?" Victoria's sharp tone snapped him back to the present. "Do you have anything to say about this?" Gabriel looked around the table, taking in the faces of people he'd worked with for years. People who had helped him build his empire, who had believed in his vision. And yet in this moment he felt a disconnect he couldn't quite explain. "I hear your concerns," he began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "And I understand them. We've worked hard to build Elysium into what it is today. But last night, when I saw that little girl standing in the rain, I was reminded of something I think we've all forgotten." He leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "We're not just in the business of selling expensive meals. We're in the business of creating experiences, of making people feel special. And yes, our typical clients can afford to pay for that privilege, but does that mean we should turn our backs on those who can't?" A murmur ran through the room. Gabriel saw a mix of reactions, some nodding in agreement, others frowning in disapproval. "With all due respect, Mr. Thornton," one of the older board members spoke up, "we're running a business here, not a charity. Our shareholders expect a certain level of return." Gabriel nodded, acknowledging the point. I understand that. And I'm not suggesting we turn Elysium into a soup kitchen, but what if we could find a way to maintain our standards while also giving back to the community? He turned to Victoria. You mentioned our social media engagement is up. People are talking about us. What if we could channel that attention into something positive? A program to support local food banks, perhaps, or a mentorship initiative for aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds. Victoria's expression remained skeptical, but Gabriel noticed a few board members nodding thoughtfully. It's worth considering, another board member chimed in. Corporate social responsibility is becoming increasingly important to consumers, especially younger demographics. As the discussion continued, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he was walking a fine line between maintaining Elysium's reputation and following his newfound conviction, but for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The meeting concluded with a tentative agreement to explore some community outreach options, though Victoria made it clear she still had reservations. As the board members filed out, she lingered behind. I hope you know what you're doing, Gabriel, she said, her use of his first name underlining the seriousness of the situation. You've built something remarkable here. It would be a shame to see it all come crashing down because of one impulsive decision. Gabriel met her gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, Victoria, but I think you're underestimating the potential here. We have an opportunity to redefine what luxury dining means, to show that true class isn't about exclusivity, but about how we treat all people. Victoria's lips tightened, but she said nothing more as she gathered her things and left the room. Alone in the conference room, Gabriel checked his watch. He had just enough time to make it to his meeting with Emma Hansen, the retired schoolteacher who had reached out about Lily. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, Gabriel's mind raced with possibilities. He thought about Lily, about the countless other children like her in the city. He thought about his own journey from poverty to wealth and the people who had helped him along the way. Stepping out onto the busy street, Gabriel felt a sense of anticipation building within him. He didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, but he was certain of one thing. His encounter with Lily had awakened something in him, a long dormant sense of purpose that he was only now beginning to understand. As he hailed a taxi to take him to the community center, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of something big, something that would challenge him in ways he hadn't been challenged in years. Something that might just redefine not only his business but his entire life. The taxi pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of traffic. Gabriel watched the familiar cityscape slide by, the gleaming skyscrapers and bustling streets taking on a new significance. He had spent years conquering this concrete jungle, building his empire from the ground up. Now, he realized, it was time to give something back. As the taxi approached the less affluent part of town where the community center was located, Gabriel felt a mix of emotions washing over him: excitement, apprehension, and a strange sense of homecoming. He was about to step into a world he had left behind long ago, a world that had shaped him in ways he was only now beginning to fully appreciate. The taxi came to a stop in front of a weathered building, its faded sign proclaiming it the Oakwood Community Center. Gabriel paid the driver and stepped out, taking in the peeling paint and the sounds of children playing somewhere inside. For a moment he hesitated, his hand on the door handle. He thought of the plush offices he'd left behind, of the board members and their concerns, of Victoria's warning. Then he thought of Lily's smile, of the gratitude in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel pushed open the door and stepped inside. As he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a threshold not just into the community center, but into a new chapter of his life. A chapter that promised both challenges and opportunities, a chance to reconcile his past with his present, and to shape a future that aligned with the values he had almost forgotten. The door swung shut behind him, the sounds of the city fading away. Ahead, he could hear the murmur of voices, the laughter of children. Somewhere in this building, Emma Hansen was waiting to talk to him about Lily and the other children who called this place a second home. Gabriel straightened his shoulders and moved forward. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a rainy night was far from over. In fact, he realized with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, it was only just beginning. The interior of the Oakwood Community Center was a far cry from the polished elegance of Elysium. The walls, painted in cheerful but fading colors, were covered with children's artwork and motivational posters. The linoleum floor, scuffed and worn, bore testament to years of little feet running back and forth. As Gabriel made his way down the hallway, he could hear the sounds of life all around him. Children laughing, the muffled voice of a teacher giving instructions, the rhythmic thump of a basketball in a nearby gym. It was a world he had almost forgotten, a world that existed just a few miles from his luxurious restaurant, but might as well have been on another planet. A small office at the end of the hall bore a handwritten sign, Emma Hansen, Volunteer Coordinator. Gabriel knocked softly, and a warm voice called out, "Come in." Emma Hansen was not what Gabriel had expected. In his mind, he had pictured a grandmotherly figure with white hair and a gentle smile. Instead, he found himself face to face with a woman who couldn't have been much older than 50. Her salt and pepper hair cut in a practical bob, her eyes sharp and assessing behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Thornton," she said, rising to shake his hand. "I must admit I was surprised to receive your email. Please have a seat." Gabriel sat down in a chair that had seen better days, acutely aware of how out of place his tailored suit looked in this modest office. "Miss Hansen," he began, "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I wanted to learn more about Lily and the work you do here." Emma's expression softened slightly. "Lily's a special child," she said, "bright, determined, with a heart of gold, but her story isn't unique, I'm afraid. We have many children here facing similar challenges." She leaned forward, her eyes intent on Gabriel's face. "Mr. Thornton, may I ask what brought you here today? Your act of kindness towards Lily was admirable, but I sense there's more to it than that." Gabriel found himself caught off guard by Emma's directness. For a moment, he considered giving her the polished response he might have offered to a business associate or a reporter, but something about Emma's no-nonsense demeanor made him reconsider. "To be honest, Ms. Hansen, I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "Seeing Lily that night, it stirred something in me. Memories, feelings I thought I'd left behind long ago." Emma nodded as if she had expected this answer. "You know, Mr. Thornton, many successful people who come from humble beginnings find themselves at a crossroads at some point in their lives. They've achieved everything they thought they wanted, only to realize there's a void they can't quite explain." Her words hit uncomfortably close to home, and Gabriel shifted in his seat. "I've built a successful business," he said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. "I've created jobs, contributed to the economy, and that's commendable," Emma interrupted gently. "But is it enough? Is it fulfilling you in the way you thought it would?" The question hung in the air between them, and Gabriel found himself at a loss for words. Before he could formulate a response, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. The office door burst open, and a small figure came barreling in. Miss Emma, I did it. I read the whole page by myself." Gabriel's breath caught in his throat as he recognized Lily, her eyes shining with excitement. A worn book clutched to her chest. She skidded to a halt as she noticed him, her eyes widening in recognition. You're the nice man from the restaurant," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Gabriel smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "Hello, Lily. It's good to see you again." Lily looked between Gabriel and Emma, confusion evident on her face. "What are you doing here, Mr. Niceman?" Emma chuckled softly. "Mr. Thornton came to learn more about our community center, Lily, and I think he'd love to hear about the progress you're making with your reading." Lily's face lit up, and she launched into an excited explanation of the book she was reading, stumbling over some of the bigger words but pressing on with determination. As Gabriel listened, he felt something shift inside him. The business concerns that had seemed so pressing just hours ago now felt distant and unimportant. When Lily finished her impromptu book report, Emma gently suggested she return to her reading group. The little girl nodded, then hesitated for a moment before throwing her arms around Gabriel in a quick hug. "Thank you again for helping me and Mama," she whispered before darting out of the room. In the silence that followed Lily's departure, Gabriel found himself blinking back unexpected tears. He turned to Emma, who was watching him with a knowing look. "Ms. Hanson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I think I'd like to learn more about how I can help. Not just Lily, but all the children here." Emma's face broke into a genuine smile. "I was hoping you'd say that, Mr. Thornton. I think this could be the beginning of something wonderful for everyone involved." As they began to discuss the various programs and needs of the community center, Gabriel felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for far too long. He didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, he was excited to find out. Little did he know that his decision to get involved with the Oakwood Community Center would set in motion a series of events that would challenge him in ways he never expected, forcing him to confront not only his past but also the very foundations of the empire he had built. As the afternoon wore on, and the sounds of children playing echoed through the halls, Gabriel Thornton found himself standing on the precipice of a new chapter in his life, a chapter that promised to be filled with challenges, surprises, and perhaps a chance at redemption he never knew he was seeking. The sun was setting by the time Gabriel left the Oakwood Community Center, casting long shadows across the worn playground equipment in the adjacent lot. His mind was buzzing with ideas and possibilities, the notes he had taken during his conversation with Emma Hanson feeling like a roadmap to a new future. As he waited for his car service to arrive, Gabriel found himself watching a group of children playing a spirited game of basketball on a cracked concrete court. Their laughter and shouts carried on the evening air, a stark contrast to the subdued atmosphere of Elysium's dining room. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his reverie. Gabriel glanced at the screen and saw Victoria's name flashing. With a sigh, he answered the call. "Gabriel," Victoria's voice was tense. "We need to talk. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" Gabriel asked, his earlier sense of purpose giving way to a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. "I've just gotten off the phone with Claude Beaumont," Victoria said, naming one of Elysium's most influential regular patrons. "He's threatening to pull his company's annual gala from our event calendar. Says he's concerned about the changing atmosphere of the restaurant." Gabriel pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. Claude Beaumont's technology company was a major player in the city's business scene, and their annual gala was one of Elysium's most profitable events. "Did he mention anything specific?" Gabriel asked, already knowing the answer. "He referenced the incident with the little girl," Victoria confirmed. "Gabriel, this is exactly what I was worried about. We're at risk of losing our core clientele." As Victoria continued to list off potential consequences, Gabriel found his gaze drawn back to the children on the basketball court. He thought of Lily's excited face as she talked about her reading progress, of Emma Hanson's passionate description of the community center's needs. "Victoria," he interrupted, his voice firm, "I hear your concerns, but I think we might be looking at this all wrong." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, a note of suspicion in her voice. "I've spent the afternoon at the community center where Lily takes classes," Gabriel explained, "and I've realized something. We have an opportunity here to do more than just serve overpriced meals to the elite. We could make a real difference in people's lives." "Gabriel," Victoria's voice was cautious, "I understand you're feeling inspired, but we have a business to run, shareholders to answer to." "I know," Gabriel said, an idea forming in his mind. "But what if we could do both? What if we could maintain our high-end clientele while also giving back to the community in a meaningful way?" He could almost hear Victoria's frown through the phone. "I'm listening," she said warily. "We'll host a charity gala," Gabriel proposed, the plan taking shape as he spoke. "We'll invite all our top clients, including Claude Beaumont. But instead of just another stuffy dinner, we'll make it about supporting local education initiatives. We'll have some of the kids from the community center there to talk about how these programs have helped them, sir." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her tone was thoughtful. "It could work," she admitted. "If we frame it right, we could generate a lot of positive press, and it might appease some of the clients who were concerned about recent events." Gabriel felt a surge of excitement. "Exactly. And it's just the beginning. I have other ideas about how we can integrate community support into our business model." As he outlined some of his thoughts, Gabriel could sense Victoria's initial skepticism, giving way to cautious interest. By the time his car arrived, they had the beginnings of a plan in place. "I'll start making calls," Victoria said as they wrapped up the conversation. "But Gabriel, are you sure about this? It's a big shift from how we've always operated." Gabriel watched as the children on the basketball court began to disperse, heading home for the evening. "I'm sure, Victoria," he said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm absolutely sure." As he slid into the back seat of the sleek black car, Gabriel felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, both from within his company and from some of Elysium's longtime patrons, but he also felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the community center behind. But as the familiar skyline of downtown came into view, Gabriel knew that something fundamental had changed. The world he was returning to, the world of high finance and luxury dining, no longer seemed as alluring as it once had. His phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. It was from Emma Hansen. "Mr. Thornton, thank you for taking the time to visit us today. Your interest in our work means more than you know. I've attached some information about our current programs and our most pressing needs. I hope this is the beginning of a long and fruitful partnership. Warm regards, Emma Hansen." Gabriel smiled as he read the email, already mentally drafting his response. He had a feeling that his visit to the community center was just the first step on a much longer journey. As the car navigated the evening traffic, Gabriel's mind raced with possibilities. He thought about the children he'd met, about Lily's determination to learn, about the potential that lay dormant in so many young minds simply because of circumstances beyond their control. He also thought about his own journey, about the people who had given him chances along the way, about the opportunities that had led him to where he was today. And for the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for what he had achieved, but for the position he was in to make a real difference. The car pulled up in front of his penthouse apartment building, and Gabriel stepped out into the cool evening air. As he rode the elevator up to his home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the brink of something monumental. He had built Elysium into a symbol of luxury and exclusivity. Now he realized he had the chance to transform it into something more. A bridge between two worlds, a force for positive change in the community. As he entered his apartment, Gabriel headed straight for his home office. He had calls to make, plans to draft, a vision to bring to life. The charity gala would just be the beginning. Little did he know that his newfound sense of purpose was about to collide head-on with forces that had long been operating in the shadows of his carefully constructed world. Forces that would test not only his resolve, but the very foundations of everything he had built. As Gabriel sat down at his desk and began to work, the city lights twinkling beyond his window, he was blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. A storm that would force him to confront not just the inequities of the present, but long-buried secrets from his own past. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a rainy night was about to take a turn that would challenge everything Gabriel thought he knew about himself, his business, and the true meaning of success. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Gabriel. Between planning the charity gala, managing the day-to-day operations of Elysium, and making regular visits to the Oakwood Community Center, he barely had a moment to catch his breath. Yet, despite the long hours and mounting challenges, he felt more energized than he had in years. On a crisp autumn morning, Gabriel found himself once again in Emma Hansen's modest office at the community center. The walls were now adorned with colorful posters advertising the upcoming charity gala, a tangible symbol of the bridge he was trying to build between his two worlds. "The children are so excited about the gala," Emma was saying, her eyes twinkling with enthusiasm. "Lily's been practicing her speech non-stop. I think she's memorized every word." Gabriel chuckled, picturing Lily's determined face as she rehearsed. "I can't wait to hear it. I have a feeling she's going to steal the show." As Emma began to share updates on the center's various programs, Gabriel's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He ignored it at first, but when it buzzed again, he frowned. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, pulling out the device. "I should check this. It might be about the gala arrangements." But as he glanced at the screen, Gabriel felt the blood drain from his face. The messages weren't about the gala at all. They were from an unknown number, and their content sent a chill down his spine. "I know your secret, Gabriel Thornton. The truth about where you really come from. How much is it worth to keep that information buried?" Gabriel's hands shook slightly as he stared at the screen, his mind racing. He had worked so hard to bury his past, to reinvent himself as the polished, successful businessman the world saw today. Who could possibly know? And why now, after all these years? "Mr. Thornton, is everything all right?" Emma's concerned voice snapped him back to the present. Gabriel forced a smile, quickly pocketing his phone. "Yes, just a small issue with the catering. Nothing to worry about." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he couldn't bring himself to share the truth. Not yet. Not when he didn't even understand what was happening himself. As he left the community center later that morning, Gabriel's mind was in turmoil. The excitement he had felt about the gala and his new projects was now overshadowed by a gnawing fear. He had always known that his carefully constructed facade might someday crack, but he had hoped it would be on his own terms. Back in his office at Elysium, Gabriel paced back and forth, debating his next move. Should he ignore the messages? Pay off the blackmailer? Come clean about his past before someone else did it for him? A knock on his door interrupted his frantic thoughts. It was Victoria, a stack of papers in her hand and a determined look on her face. "Gabriel, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "I've been doing some digging into the financials for this charity gala idea of yours, and something doesn't add up." Gabriel felt his heart rate quicken. Had Victoria somehow uncovered his secret? But as she spread the papers across his desk, he realized her concerns were of a different nature. "These projections for the community programs," Victoria continued, pointing to a series of charts, "they're ambitious to say the least. I'm worried we're overextending ourselves, and some of our top-tier clients are expressing reservations about the shift in focus." Gabriel leaned against his desk, trying to focus on Victoria's words, even as his mind raced with thoughts of the threatening messages. "Victoria," he said, his voice sounding strained even to his own ears, "I understand your concerns, but I truly believe this is the right direction for us. We have an opportunity to make a real difference." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, picking up on his discomfort. "Gabriel, what's really going on here? Ever since that night with the little girl, you've been different. Is there something you're not telling me?" For a moment, Gabriel was tempted to confide in her. Victoria had been his right hand for years, a steadying presence through countless business challenges. But the weight of his secret, the fear of judgment, held him back. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just feeling the pressure of making this gala a success. Speaking of which, how are the RSVPs looking?" Victoria hesitated, clearly not fully convinced by his deflection, but she allowed the subject change. As she began to run through the guest list, Gabriel's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He ignored it, but he could feel its presence like a burning coal against his leg. As Victoria left his office, Gabriel sank into his chair, feeling the weight of his past and the uncertainty of his future pressing down on him. He had worked so hard to build this life, to become someone worthy of respect and admiration. The thought of it all crumbling because of mistakes made long ago filled him with dread. But as his eyes fell on the charity gala poster on his desk, featuring smiling faces of children from the community center, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of determination. He had started down this path for a reason. He couldn't let fear of his past derail the good he was trying to do now. With a deep breath, Gabriel reached for his phone. It was time to face whatever threat was lurking in the shadows. As he opened the latest message, he steeled himself for what was to come, knowing that the choices he made in the coming days would shape not just his own future, but the futures of Lily and all the other children he had promised to help. Little did Gabriel know that the threads of his past and present were about to intertwine in ways he could never have imagined, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test not just his resolve, but the very foundations of the life he had built. The night before the charity gala, Gabriel found himself standing alone in the grand ballroom of Elysium, surrounded by elegant decorations and the quiet hum of anticipation. The tables were set with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses, each centerpiece a carefully crafted work of art. Banners displaying the logos of the community center and various corporate sponsors hung from the walls, a visual representation of the bridge he was trying to build between two worlds. As he surveyed the room, Gabriel's phone buzzed in his pocket. His heart raced as he pulled it out, half expecting another threatening message. Instead, it was a text from Lily's mother. "Mr. Thornton, I just wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for Lily and for giving her this opportunity. She's so excited about her speech tomorrow. You've made such a difference in our lives." A smile tugged at Gabriel's lips as he read the message, a welcome respite from the stress of the past few weeks. But the moment of warmth was short-lived as he scrolled down to see the unread message that had been haunting him. "Time's running out, Gabriel. Meet me at the old Riverside warehouse at midnight if you want to keep your secret safe. Come alone or everyone at your fancy gala will learn the truth about who you really are." Gabriel's hand tightened around the phone, his mind racing. The Riverside warehouse, he hadn't heard that name in years, not since in... "Everything all right, boss?" Gabriel startled at the sound of Marco's voice. His head of security stood in the doorway, a concerned look on his face. "Yes, everything's fine," Gabriel lied, pocketing his phone. "Just double-checking some last-minute details for tomorrow." Marco nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "Security plans are all set. We've coordinated with the local police to ensure everything runs smoothly, given the high-profile nature of the event." "Excellent work, Marco, thank you," Gabriel said, forcing a smile. As Marco turned to leave, a thought struck Gabriel. "Actually, Marco, there is one thing. Could you run a discreet background check on all the new staff we've hired for the gala, just as a precaution?" Marco raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Consider it done. Anything specific I should be looking for?" Gabriel hesitated. Should he mention the threatening messages, the name of the warehouse? But no, that would lead to too many questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "Nothing specific," he said finally. "Just anything unusual." After Marco left, Gabriel found himself drawn to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The Riverside warehouse was out there somewhere, a relic of his past that he thought he'd left behind forever. The temptation to ignore the message, to focus on the gala and the good he was trying to do, was strong, but deep down he knew he couldn't risk his secret coming out, not when he was so close to making a real difference. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Gabriel, do you have a moment?" she asked, stepping into the room. He nodded, turning away from the window. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Victoria took a deep breath as if steeling herself. "I've been doing some research, trying to understand your sudden interest in this charity work, and I found some discrepancies in your background." Gabriel felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Your official biography says you grew up in Connecticut, attended private schools before getting your MBA. But I can't find any records of you before your college years. It's as if you didn't exist." For a moment, Gabriel considered continuing the charade, spinning another lie to add to the web he'd created. But looking at Victoria, seeing the mixture of concern and determination in her eyes, he felt a sudden weariness wash over him. "You're right," he said softly. "The official story, it's not entirely accurate." Victoria's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Gabriel sank into a nearby chair, suddenly feeling the weight of every secret he'd carried for so long. "The truth is, I grew up not far from here, in a neighborhood not unlike the one where Lily lives now. My father left when I was young, and my mother, she did her best. But times were tough." He paused, lost in memories he'd tried so hard to forget. "I made some mistakes when I was younger, got involved with people I shouldn't have. The Riverside warehouse, that was where we used to meet." Victoria listened intently, her expression a mixture of shock and growing understanding. "So all of this," she gestured around the opulent ballroom, "your success, Elysium, built on a lie," Gabriel finished for her. "Or at least a carefully constructed version of the truth. I thought I could leave my past behind, become someone new, and for a while it worked. But seeing Lily that night helping at the community center, it brought everything back. There was a long moment of silence as Victoria processed this information. Finally, she spoke. "Gabriel, I understand why you kept this secret. But why are you telling me now?" Gabriel hesitated, then pulled out his phone, showing her the threatening messages. "Someone knows the truth. They're blackmailing me, threatening to expose everything at the gala tomorrow." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she read the messages. "Have you contacted the police?" Gabriel shook his head. "And risk the story getting out. Everything I've built, all the good we're trying to do with this gala, it would all fall apart." "So what are you going to do?" Gabriel stood, his jaw set with determination. "I'm going to meet them tonight at the warehouse. I need to know who's behind this and what they want." Victoria looked alarmed. "Gabriel, that's incredibly dangerous. At least let me send Marco with you." But Gabriel was already shaking his head. "No, I have to do this alone. Victoria, I need you to promise me something. If something happens to me, if I'm not back for the gala tomorrow, make sure it goes on as planned. Those kids are counting on us." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but the look in Gabriel's eyes stopped her. Instead, she simply nodded, her expression a mixture of concern and respect. As Gabriel prepared to leave, his mind raced with possibilities. Who could be behind the blackmail? An old associate from his troubled youth? Someone from his current life who had uncovered his secret? And what would they demand in exchange for their silence? One thing was certain: as he stepped out into the cool night air, heading towards a past he thought he'd left behind, Gabriel knew that his life was about to change irrevocably. The carefully constructed facade he'd built over the years was crumbling, and what would emerge from the ruins was anyone's guess. With a final glance back at Elysium, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness, Gabriel hailed a taxi. "Riverside Warehouse," he told the driver, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, merging into the late-night traffic, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that he was heading towards a reckoning that had been years in the making. Whatever awaited him at the warehouse, he knew that by the time the sun rose on the day of the gala, nothing would ever be the same again. The taxi wound its way through the city's streets, leaving behind the glittering skyscrapers and upscale neighborhoods for the grittier, industrial outskirts. As they approached the Riverside district, Gabriel felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. It had been years since he'd ventured into this part of town, but the memories came flooding back with startling clarity. The cab pulled up to a stop in front of a dilapidated warehouse, its windows dark and broken, walls covered in graffiti. Gabriel paid the driver and stepped out, the crunch of broken glass under his feet, a stark contrast to the plush carpets of Elysium. For a moment he stood there, staring at the building that held so many secrets from his past. The Riverside Warehouse had once been the center of his world, a place where a young, angry Gabriel had found a twisted sense of belonging among others who felt abandoned by society. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel approached the rusted side door, surprised to find it unlocked. As he stepped inside, the musty smell of decay and neglect assaulted his senses. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows across the empty space. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I'm here, show yourself." For a long moment there was only silence. Then from the shadows a figure emerged. As it stepped into a patch of moonlight, Gabriel felt his breath catch in his throat. "Hello, Gabe," said a familiar voice, tinged with a hint of amusement. "Long time no see." "Alex," Gabriel whispered, hardly believing his eyes. "Alex Rodriguez." The man before him grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Alex had aged since Gabriel had last seen him, lines etched deeply around his mouth and eyes, but there was no mistaking those piercing green eyes that had once convinced a young Gabriel to follow him into a life of petty crime. "The one and only," Alex replied, spreading his arms wide. "Surprised to see me? I bet you thought you'd left all this behind when you became the great Gabriel Thornton, restaurant mogul and philanthropist extraordinaire." Gabriel's mind raced. Alex had been his best friend once, his partner in crime, the one who had introduced him to the gang that operated out of this very warehouse. But that was a lifetime ago, or so he had thought. "How did you find me?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse. Alex chuckled, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Oh, it wasn't hard. You may have changed your name, polished up your accent, but you couldn't resist coming back to the old neighborhood, could you? Helping out poor little girls, playing the savior. It was only a matter of time before someone recognized you." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you want, Alex? Money." "Money?" Alex spat the word out like it tasted foul. "You think that's what this is about?" "No, Gabe. This is about justice, about paying for your sins." Confusion clouded Gabriel's features. "What are you talking about?" Alex's face hardened, all traces of amusement gone. "You don't remember, do you? The night you left? The job that went wrong? Ring any bells?" Suddenly, Gabriel felt the floor drop out from beneath him as the memories came rushing back. The botched robbery, the security guard who wasn't supposed to be there, the gunshot that had haunted his nightmares for years. "That wasn't my fault," Gabriel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Alex's voice rose, echoing off the walls. "You were the one who planned it all, Gabe. You were the smart one, the one who was supposed to have it all figured out. And when it all went to hell, you ran, left us to take the fall." Gabriel shook his head, desperately trying to make sense of it all. "I was scared, Alex. I was just a kid. I didn't know what else to do." "And the rest of us?" Alex demanded. "We were kids too, but we paid the price. I spent 10 years in prison because of that night. 10 years. And you? You got to reinvent yourself, become a pillar of the community." The weight of guilt and regret threatened to crush Gabriel. He had spent years trying to forget that night, to convince himself that he had made amends by becoming successful, by giving back to the community. But standing here, face to face with his past, he realized how hollow that reasoning was. "I'm sorry, Alex," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. "I never meant for any of that to happen. If I could go back—" "But you can't," Alex interrupted. "You can't change the past. But you can make it right. That's why I'm here." Gabriel tensed, expecting a demand for money or some form of retribution. But what Alex said next caught him completely off guard. "I want you to confess," Alex stated, his eyes boring into Gabriel's, "at your fancy charity gala tomorrow, in front of all your rich friends and benefactors. I want you to tell them who you really are, what you've done." Gabriel felt the blood drain from his face. "Alex, please, you don't understand. The gala, it's not about me, it's for the kids, for the community. If I do what you're asking, all of that will fall apart." Alex's expression remained impassive. "That's the point, Gabe. You don't get to play the hero. You don't get to wash away your sins with charity work and good intentions. It's time for the truth to come out." As the gravity of the situation settled over him, Gabriel's mind raced. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for was on the verge of crumbling. But more than that, he thought of Lily, of the other children at the community center who were counting on the success of the gala. "There has to be another way," Gabriel pleaded. "Something else I can do to make this right." Alex studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You have until the end of the gala tomorrow night to decide. Either you come clean, or I'll do it for you. And trust me, my version of the story won't be kind." With that, Alex turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving Gabriel alone in the cavernous warehouse, the weight of his past pressing down on him like never before. As he stumbled out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, Gabriel's mind was a whirlwind of emotions and conflicting thoughts. The gala was less than 24 hours away. He had a choice to make, a choice that would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of all those who had come to depend on him. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone to call for a taxi. As he waited, staring at the dilapidated warehouse that held so many painful memories, Gabriel knew that the coming day would be the most challenging of his life. The mask he had worn for so long was cracking, and what lay beneath would soon be exposed to the light of day. The question was, would he be the one to remove it, or would it be torn away from him? The morning of the gala dawned bright and clear, but for Gabriel Thornton, it felt as though a storm cloud hung over his head. He had barely slept, his mind racing with the impossible choice that lay before him. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with trembling hands, He hardly recognized the man staring back at him. A soft knock on the door broke through his reverie. "Mr. Thornton?" It was Sarah, his assistant. "The car is ready to take you to Elysium, and Ms. Hawthorne called. She says it's urgent." Gabriel closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Sarah. Tell her I'll be there shortly." The ride to Elysium was a blur. Gabriel's mind kept replaying his conversation with Alex, searching for a way out, a solution that wouldn't destroy everything he had built. But every scenario he imagined ended in disaster. As he walked into Elysium, the bustling activity of the final gala preparations surrounded him. Staff members hurried back and forth, putting the finishing touches on decorations and checking place settings. In the midst of it all stood Victoria, her usually calm demeanor betraying a hint of worry as she caught sight of him. "Gabriel," she said, pulling him aside. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all night. Did you meet with the blackmailer?" Gabriel nodded, his expression grim. "It's worse than we thought, Victoria. It's Alex Rodriguez." Victoria's eyes widened in recognition. She was one of the few people who knew fragments of Gabriel's past, though even she didn't know the full story. "Alex? From the old neighborhood? What does he want?" "He wants me to confess," Gabriel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "To tell everyone the truth about my past, about what happened that night." Victoria's face paled. "Gabriel, you can't. Everything we've worked for, the gala, the community center, it would all fall apart." "Don't you think I know that?" Gabriel snapped, immediately regretting his harsh tone. "I'm sorry, I don't know what to do." Before Victoria could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Emma Hansen and a group of children from the community center, including Lily. The little girl's face lit up as she caught sight of Gabriel. "Mr. Thornton!" Lily called out, rushing over to him. "Look, I'm all dressed up for my speech." She twirled, showing off her new dress, her eyes shining with excitement. Gabriel felt his heart constrict. He knelt down to Lily's level, forcing a smile onto his face. "You look beautiful, Lily. Are you ready for your big moment?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "I've practiced so much, I can't wait to tell everyone about how you helped me and my mama, and how the community center is changing lives." As Gabriel listened to Lily's excited chatter, he felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him even more heavily. How could he shatter this child's faith in him? But how could he continue living a lie? The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Guests began to arrive, the who's who of the city's elite, mingling with community leaders and sponsors. Gabriel moved through the crowd on autopilot, shaking hands and making small talk, all while feeling as though he was standing on the edge of a precipice. As the time for the speeches approached, Gabriel excused himself and slipped away to a quiet corner of the restaurant. He pulled out his phone, staring at the blank screen. Should he call Alex? Try to negotiate? Should he warn Victoria and Emma about what might happen? Or should he simply run, disappear before the truth could catch up with him once and for all? Just as he was about to make a decision, he felt a small hand tugging at his sleeve. He looked down to see Lily, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mr. Thornton," she said softly, "are you okay? You look sad." Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. He crouched down next to Lily, meeting her earnest gaze. "I'm all right, Lily. Just a little nervous about the speeches." Lily's face broke into a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Mr. Thornton. My mama always says that being nervous just means you care about something a lot. And you care about helping people, right?" Her words, so simple and yet so profound, hit Gabriel like a physical blow. In that moment, looking into Lily's trusting eyes, he knew what he had to do. "You're right, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do care. Very much." As Lily was called away to prepare for her speech, Gabriel straightened up, a newfound resolve settling over him. He spotted Victoria across the room and made his way over to her. "Victoria," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need you to do something for me." She looked at him, concern evident in her eyes. "Of course, Gabriel, what is it?" "After Lily's speech, before I'm supposed to go on, I need you to make an announcement. Say there's been a change in the program." Victoria's brow furrowed. "What kind of change?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "Tell them that instead of my planned speech, I have an important truth to share with everyone. A story about second chances and the power of community." Understanding dawned on Victoria's face. "Gabriel, are you sure about this?" He nodded, a sense of calm settling over him for the first time in days. "I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out, but on my terms." As Victoria moved away to make the necessary arrangements, Gabriel scanned the room. In a far corner, partially hidden by a pillar, he caught sight of a familiar face. Alex was here, watching and waiting. Gabriel met his old friend's gaze, giving a small nod. Alex's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in what might have been respect. The sound of applause drew Gabriel's attention back to the stage. Lily had finished her speech, her face glowing with pride as the audience showered her with approval. As she made her way off the stage, Victoria stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a slight change to our program. Mr. Thornton has an important story to share with us all, one that speaks to the very heart of why we're here tonight." As Gabriel made his way to the stage, he felt as though he was walking through a dream. The faces of the audience blurred together, the wealthy patrons, the community leaders, the children from Oakwood. Somewhere in that sea of faces was Alex, waiting to see if Gabriel would follow through. Taking his place at the microphone, Gabriel looked out over the crowd. He caught sight of Lily, sitting with her mother, both of them beaming up at him with pride and affection. In that moment, he knew that whatever the consequences of his next words, he was making the right choice. "Good evening, everyone," Gabriel began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "I stand before you tonight not just as the owner of Elysium, or as a businessman, but as someone who has been given a second chance at life. And it's time I shared the truth about that second chance with all of you." As Gabriel began to speak, unraveling the carefully constructed narrative of his life, the room fell into a hushed silence. The story that poured forth, of a troubled youth, of mistakes made and lessons learned the hard way, of a fateful night that changed everything, held the audience spellbound. He spoke of his journey from the streets to the boardroom, of the guilt he had carried for years, and of how a chance encounter with a little girl on a rainy night had awakened something long dormant within him. As he neared the end of his tale, Gabriel's eyes found Lily in the crowd. "I stand before you tonight not as a self-made man, but as someone who was given an opportunity to change, to grow, to make amends. And it's an opportunity I believe everyone deserves." The silence that followed his final words was deafening. Gabriel held his breath, waiting for the backlash, the shocked whispers, the sound of his carefully built world crumbling around him. But then, from somewhere in the back of the room, a slow clap began. It was Alex, standing tall, his face a mixture of emotions Gabriel couldn't quite decipher. Gradually, others joined in, the applause building until it filled the entire room. As Gabriel stepped down from the stage, he was engulfed in a wave of people, some offering words of support, others sharing their own stories of struggle and redemption. Through it all, he caught glimpses of the key players in his life: Victoria, a look of pride on her face, Emma Hansen, nodding in approval, and Lily, her eyes shining with admiration. The night was far from over, and Gabriel knew there would be consequences to face in the days to come. But as he stood there, surrounded by a community that had heard his darkest truths and embraced him anyway, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Gabriel Thornton. His revelation had sent shockwaves through the city's social and business circles, dominating headlines and sparking intense debates about redemption, second chances, and the nature of philanthropy. As Gabriel sat in his office at Elysium, staring out at the city skyline, he couldn't help but marvel at how differently things had turned out from what he had feared. Instead of universal condemnation, his honesty had struck a chord with many. The restaurant had been inundated with reservations from people eager to dine at the establishment of the man who had so publicly bared his soul. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria, a stack of newspapers and printouts in her arms. "You might want to see these," she said, spreading the papers across his desk. "It seems your story has sparked quite the conversation." Gabriel scanned the headlines. From Street to Elite, the remarkable journey of Gabriel Thornton. Second chances, how one man's honesty is changing the face of philanthropy. Thornton's tale, a wake-up call for corporate America. It's not all positive, Victoria warned, pointing to a few less flattering articles. Some of our more traditional clients are less than thrilled. We've had a few cancellations of long-standing reservations. Gabriel nodded, having expected as much. And the charity programs, the community center? Victoria's face broke into a rare smile. That's the surprising part. Donations have skyrocketed. It seems your story has inspired people. We've received offers from other businesses wanting to partner with us on community initiatives. As they discussed the various reactions and potential next steps, Gabriel's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old spot. We need to talk. Alex." Gabriel felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. He hadn't seen or heard from Alex since the night of the gala. What could he want now? "Victoria," he said, standing up, "I need to step out for a bit. Can you handle things here?" She nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" "I hope so," Gabriel replied, grabbing his jacket. "I'll fill you in when I get back." The drive to the Riverside warehouse felt different this time. The weight of secrecy was gone, replaced by a nervous anticipation. As Gabriel pulled up to the dilapidated building, he saw Alex waiting outside, leaning against a rusted old car. "Didn't expect to see you rolling up in that fancy car of yours," Alex called out as Gabriel approached. "Thought you might have gone back to taking the bus after your big reveal." Gabriel couldn't help but chuckle. Some habits are hard to break, I guess. "What's this about, Alex?" Alex's expression turned serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did at that gala. Gotta admit, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." "Neither did I for a while there," Gabriel admitted. Alex nodded, a look of grudging respect in his eyes. "It got me thinking about my own life, the choices I've made, and well, I think I might be ready for my own second chance." Gabriel felt a surge of hope. "What did you have in mind?" "That community center of yours," Alex said, his voice gruff with emotion he was clearly trying to hide. "They got any use for an ex-con trying to turn his life around?" A slow smile spread across Gabriel's face. "I think we might be able to work something out, but Alex, it won't be easy. There's a lot of trust to rebuild, a lot of work to do." Alex straightened up, meeting Gabriel's gaze. "I know, but if you could do it, maybe I can too. Besides, someone's got to keep you honest. Make sure you don't forget where you came from now that you're some big-shot philanthropist." As they continued to talk, hashing out possibilities and addressing old wounds, Gabriel felt a sense of things coming full circle. The warehouse that had once been a symbol of his darkest days was now becoming a place of new beginnings. Meanwhile, across town at the Oakwood Community Center, Lily sat in her reading class, her mind only half on the book in front of her. She couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Thornton's speech at the gala, about the sadness and hope in his eyes as he had told his story. "Lily?" Ms. Hanson's voice broke through her reverie. "Is everything all right? You seem distracted today." Lily looked up, her young face serious. "Ms. Hanson, can people really change? Like if they did bad things before, can they become good?" Emma Hanson smiled gently, recognizing the source of Lily's contemplation. "That's a very deep question, Lily. What do you think?" Lily thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. I think they can, if they really want to. Like Mr. Thornton, he did bad things, but now he helps people. He helped me and Mama." Emma nodded encouragingly. "That's right. People can change, especially when they have support and opportunities. That's part of why what we do here at the community center is so important." As the class continued, Lily found herself looking at the world around her with new eyes. She thought about her own father, who had left when she was a baby. Could he change too? Could he come back and be a good dad? These thoughts swirled in her young mind, planting seeds of hope and determination that would shape her own journey in ways she couldn't yet imagine. As the day drew to a close, Gabriel and Alex stood outside the warehouse, their conversation winding down. "So we really doing this?" Alex asked, a hint of his old bravado creeping into his voice. Gabriel nodded, extending his hand. We're really doing this. Partners. Alex hesitated for just a moment before grasping Gabriel's hand firmly. Partners. As they shook hands, both men felt the weight of their shared history and the promise of a new future. Neither of them knew exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time in years they were facing it together. The sun was setting as Gabriel drove back to Elysium, casting long shadows across the city. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging. There would be skeptics to convince, trust to rebuild, and a delicate balance to maintain between his two worlds. But as he thought of Lily's bright smile, of Alex's tentative steps towards redemption, of the community that had embraced him despite his flaws, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it, not just for himself but for all those who needed hope in their lives. As Elysium came into view, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight, Gabriel allowed himself a small smile. The restaurant that had once been a symbol of his carefully constructed facade was now becoming a beacon of transformation and hope. And he was just getting started. The following week saw Elysium and the Oakwood Community Center buzzing with activity. Gabriel's revelation had sparked a renewed interest in community engagement among the city's elite, and he was determined to capitalize on this momentum. One sunny afternoon, Gabriel stood in the community center's main hall, surveying the scene before him. Volunteers, many of them former Elysium patrons, were busy painting walls, repairing furniture, and setting up new computer stations. Among them, somewhat awkwardly wielding a paintbrush, was Alex. "Never thought I'd see the day," Victoria commented, coming to stand beside Gabriel. "Alex Rodriguez doing community service that's not court-ordered." Gabriel chuckled. "People can surprise you, sometimes they even surprise themselves." As they watched, Lily darted between the volunteers, offering encouragement and occasionally supervising their work. Her energy was infectious, drawing smiles from even the most serious-faced volunteers. "Mr. Thornton," Lily called out, rushing over to him. "Come see what we're doing in the library." Taking Gabriel's hand, Lily led him to a room that had once been a storage area. Now it was transformed into a cozy reading nook, with colorful beanbags, low bookshelves, and a beautiful mural of a forest scene covering one wall. "Miss Hanson says we're going to have story time here every day," Lily explained excitedly. "And look!" She pointed to a plaque on the wall. "We named it after you." Gabriel's throat tightened with emotion as he read the words. "The Gabriel Thornton Reading Room, where second chances begin." "Do you like it?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Gabriel knelt down, meeting Lily's gaze. "I love it, Lily. But you know what? I think we should add something to that plaque." Lily tilted her head curiously. "What?" "I think we should add your name too," Gabriel said softly. "Because you, Lily, are the reason all of this started. You're the one who reminded me of what's truly important in life." Lily's face lit up with a mix of surprise and joy. She threw her arms around Gabriel's neck in a tight hug. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," she whispered. As Gabriel returned the hug, he caught sight of Emma Hanson watching from the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. She gave him a small nod of approval before turning to address a group of volunteers. Later that evening, as the volunteers were packing up for the day, Gabriel found himself alone in the reading room. He ran his hand along the spines of the new books, many of them donated by his business associates after hearing his story. "Quite a change from the old days, huh?" Alex's voice came from behind him. Gabriel turned to see his old friend leaning against the doorframe, paint splatters on his clothes and a thoughtful expression on his face. "Remember when our idea of a good time was tagging walls and picking pockets?" Alex continued, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. Gabriel nodded, memories of their troubled youth flashing through his mind. "We've come a long way, Alex." "Yeah, well, some of us took the scenic route," Alex said with a self-deprecating chuckle. "But I gotta admit, this feels good. Doing something that matters, you know?" Before Gabriel could respond, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Gabriel, we've got a situation at Elysium. The health inspector is there for a surprise visit, and he's asking some pointed questions." Gabriel felt a flicker of concern. He had been so focused on the community center that he had been somewhat neglecting the day-to-day operations of his restaurant. "I'll be right there," he said, turning to leave. "Hey," Alex called out, stopping him. "Want some backup? I may not know much about fancy restaurants, but I know a thing or two about dealing with authority figures." Gabriel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, why not? It's about time Elysium saw a new side of things too." As they drove to the restaurant, Gabriel couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. Here he was, the owner of an upscale restaurant, rushing to deal with a health inspection with his former partner in crime by his side. When they arrived at Elysium, they found the health inspector, a stern-faced man named Mr. Simmons, meticulously examining the kitchen. The staff looked on nervously, clearly unsure how to handle this unexpected scrutiny. "Mr. Thornton," Mr. Simmons said, looking up from his clipboard, "I have some concerns about recent changes in your operations. It's come to our attention that you've been allowing individuals from the community center to observe kitchen operations, including children." Gabriel took a deep breath, preparing to explain his new initiatives, but Alex stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Simmons," he said, his voice calm and respectful. "I'm Alex Rodriguez, the new community liaison for Elysium. If I may, I'd like to explain our educational outreach program." As Alex smoothly detailed the safety protocols and educational benefits of the program, Gabriel watched in amazement. The man standing before him, confidently addressing the health inspector, seemed a far cry from the angry ex-con he had reconnected with just weeks ago. By the time Alex finished his explanation, even Mr. Simmons seemed impressed. "Well, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Thornton, it seems you've put a lot of thought into this program. I'll need to see your documentation, of course, but I must say, it's refreshing to see this level of community engagement from an establishment like Elysium." As Mr. Simmons continued his inspection, now with a noticeably more positive attitude, Gabriel pulled Alex aside. "That was incredible," he said. "Where did that come from?" Alex shrugged, a hint of his old cocky grin appearing. "Hey, you're not the only one who can clean up nice and talk fancy. Besides, someone's got to have your back while you're off playing Robin Hood." Gabriel laughed, feeling a sense of true partnership with Alex for the first time in years. As they walked through Elysium, discussing potential new community initiatives, Gabriel realized that his two worlds, the high-end restaurant business and his newfound commitment to giving back, were beginning to merge in ways he never could have anticipated. Later that night, after the health inspector had left with a largely positive report, and the last of the dinner service was winding down, Gabriel stood in Elysium's dining room. The space that had once been a symbol of exclusivity now felt different. He could almost see the ghosts of his past mingling with visions of the future, a future where Elysium could be both a successful business and a force for positive change in the community. As he turned to leave, his eye caught the charity gala poster still hanging on the wall. Lily's beaming face looked out at him, a reminder of the little girl who had set this whole journey in motion. Gabriel smiled to himself, feeling a sense of anticipation for what lay ahead. He had faced his past, embraced his true self, and found a new purpose. And while he knew there would be challenges ahead, he was ready to face them, not alone, but with a community of support he never knew he needed. As he locked up Elysium for the night, Gabriel felt a sense of peace wash over him. He was no longer just a successful restaurateur, nor was he the troubled youth he'd once been. He was something new, a man using his second chance to create second chances for others. With a final glance at the restaurant that had been both his mask and his salvation, Gabriel stepped out into the night, ready to write the next chapter of his story, a story of redemption, community, and the transformative power of honesty and compassion. As autumn gave way to winter, the initial excitement surrounding Gabriel's revelation and new initiatives began to face its first real tests. The chill in the air seemed to mirror the cooling enthusiasm of some of Elysium's long-standing patrons, who were struggling to reconcile the exclusive atmosphere they had come to expect with the restaurant's new, more inclusive direction. One particularly frosty evening, Gabriel found himself mediating a tense situation in Elysium's main dining room. A group of regulars, led by the influential businessman Claude Beaumont, were voicing their displeasure rather loudly. "This is unacceptable, Thornton," Beaumont declared, his face flushed with indignation. "I brought an important client here tonight, expecting the usual Elysium experience, and what do I find? Children from that community center of yours, gawking at us like we're animals in a zoo." Gabriel took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "Mr. Beaumont, I assure you the children are here as part of our educational program. They're learning about fine dining and service industry careers. I apologize if their presence has disturbed your evening." Beaumont scoffed. "Educational program? This is a five-star restaurant, not a vocational school. So I've been coming here for years, Thornton. I've supported your business, but this is not what I signed up for." As Gabriel tried to smooth things over, he caught sight of Victoria hovering nearby, a concerned look on her face. He could practically hear her thoughts. "I told you this might happen." Just as the situation seemed on the verge of escalating, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, Mr. Beaumont?" It was Lily, standing at the edge of the group, her eyes wide but determined. "I'm sorry if we bothered you. We're just really excited to learn. Did you know that before Mr. Thornton helped me, I'd never even been inside a fancy restaurant? Now I'm learning how to set a table properly, and even about different types of forks." The sincerity in Lily's voice seemed to catch Beaumont off guard. He looked at the little girl, then back at Gabriel, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Well," he said, his tone still gruff but less hostile, "I suppose there's no harm in learning, but perhaps a bit more discretion in the future, Thornton." Gabriel nodded, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Of course, Mr. Beaumont. We're still finding the right balance. Thank you for your patience." As Beaumont and his group returned to their table, crisis temporarily averted, Gabriel knelt down next to Lily. "That was very brave of you," he said softly. "But how did you know what to say?" Lily smiled. "Ms. Hanson has been teaching us about diplomacy. She says it's important to learn how to talk to all kinds of people, even when they're upset." Gabriel couldn't help but chuckle. "Ms. Hanson is a very wise woman. Now, why don't you rejoin your group? I think it's almost time for your behind-the-scenes kitchen tour." As Lily scampered off, Gabriel stood to find Victoria at his elbow. "That was a close one," she murmured. "We need to talk about this, Gabriel. The balance isn't quite right yet." Gabriel nodded, feeling the weight of his dual responsibilities pressing down on him. "You're right. Let's meet first thing tomorrow. Bring Alex too. I want his perspective on this." Later that night, after the last of the diners had left and the kitchen had been cleaned, Gabriel sat alone in his office, poring over financial reports and customer feedback forms. The numbers were concerning. While the publicity from his revelation had initially boosted business, the past few weeks had seen a decline in high-end bookings. A soft knock on the door interrupted his brooding. It was Emma Hanson. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping into the office. "I wanted to thank you for today. The children learned so much despite the hiccup with Mr. Beaumont." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "I'm glad they enjoyed it, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm trying to do too much, too fast. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe we need to slow down, find a better balance." Emma regarded him thoughtfully. "Change is never easy, Gabriel, especially when you're trying to bridge two very different worlds. But what you're doing, it matters. You're changing lives." "But at what cost?" Gabriel asked, gesturing to the reports on his desk. "If Elysium fails, if I can't keep the business afloat, how can I help anyone?" Emma stepped forward, her expression serious. "Do you remember what you told the children last week? About how success isn't just about money, but about the impact you make on others?" Gabriel nodded, recalling the mentoring session he'd led at the community center. "Well," Emma continued, "I think it's time you took your own advice. Yes, the financial side is important, but don't lose sight of the bigger picture. You're creating opportunities, inspiring hope. That's a different kind of currency, but it's just as valuable." As Emma's words sank in, Gabriel felt some of the tension leave his body. She was right. He had started down this path for a reason. He couldn't give up at the first sign of trouble. "Thank you, Emma," he said softly. "I needed that reminder." Emma smiled. "That's what community is all about, supporting each other through the tough times. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's another day. Another chance to make a difference. As Emma left, Gabriel turned back to the reports on his desk. But now, instead of seeing only problems, he began to see possibilities. Ideas started to form in his mind, ways to integrate the community programs more seamlessly into Elysium's operations, strategies to appeal to both his old clientele and a new, socially conscious demographic. He worked late into the night, energized by a renewed sense of purpose. By the time he finally left the restaurant, the first light of dawn was starting to peek over the city skyline. As he stepped out into the cool morning air, Gabriel felt a mix of exhaustion and excitement. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt. But he also knew he wasn't facing them alone. With Lily's innocent wisdom, Emma's steadfast support, Alex's street-smart perspective, and even Victoria's pragmatic caution, Gabriel realized he had assembled a team that could help him navigate these uncharted waters. As he drove home, the city slowly coming to life around him, Gabriel allowed himself a small smile. He had faced his past and chosen to embrace a new future, a future that, while uncertain, held the promise of something truly remarkable. Little did he know that the true test of his resolve and the strength of his newfound community was just around the corner, waiting to challenge everything he had built in ways he could never have anticipated. The next few weeks saw Gabriel throwing himself into the challenge of balancing Elysium's high-end reputation with its new community-focused initiatives. He worked tirelessly, refining the educational programs, adjusting the restaurant's operations, and reaching out to both skeptical longtime patrons and potential new supporters. One chilly December morning, Gabriel sat in Elysium's kitchen, surrounded by a group of eager faces. He was leading a cooking class for some of the older children from the community center, teaching them how to make a simple yet elegant pasta dish. "Remember," he said, demonstrating the proper technique for kneading dough, "cooking is about patience and precision, but it's also about passion. You have to love what you're creating." As the children worked on their pasta, Gabriel caught sight of Alex entering the kitchen, a concerned look on his face. "Hey, chef," Alex called out, a hint of forced casualness in his voice. "Got a minute?" Sensing the urgency in Alex's tone, Gabriel nodded. "Keep working on that dough, everyone. I'll be right back." He followed Alex out into the hallway, closing the kitchen door behind him. "What's going on?" Alex glanced around, making sure they were alone. "We've got a problem. Remember Joey, the shark Caruso?" Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. Joey Caruso had been a low-level enforcer for the gang they'd run with in their youth. He wasn't the brightest, but he was mean and held grudges like nobody's business. "What about him?" Gabriel asked, already dreading the answer. "He's out," Alex said grimly. "Got released last week. And word on the street is he's been asking about you, about us." Gabriel leaned against the wall, his mind racing. "You think he knows about the restaurant? About what we're doing here?" Alex nodded. "It's not exactly a secret, Gabe. Your story's been all over the news. Joey might not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but he can read a newspaper." Before Gabriel could respond, the kitchen door opened and Lily poked her head out. "Mr. Thornton, I think I did something wrong. My dough is all sticky." Gabriel forced a smile. "I'll be right there, Lily. Just keep working on it." As Lily disappeared back into the kitchen, Gabriel turned to Alex. "We can't let this threaten everything we've built. What do you think Joey wants?" Alex shrugged. "Knowing Joey, probably thinks we owe him something. Figures if we've gone legit and made it big, he deserves a cut." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "We need to handle this carefully. We can't risk anyone getting hurt, especially the kids." "I've got some contacts," Alex offered. "People who might be able to reason with Joey, or at least find out what he's planning." Gabriel nodded. "Do it. But Alex, be careful. We're not those street kids anymore. We've got too much to lose now." As Alex left to make his calls, Gabriel took a deep breath, steeling himself before returning to the kitchen. He plastered on a smile as he helped Lily with her dough, but his mind was elsewhere, grappling with this new threat to the life he'd worked so hard to build. Later that afternoon, as the children were leaving with their freshly made pasta, Gabriel caught sight of Victoria watching from the doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face. That was quite a sight, she said as he approached. Gabriel Thornton, celebrity chef, teaching kids from the community center how to make pasta in Elysium's kitchen. If someone had told me this would be happening a year ago, I'd have thought they were crazy. Gabriel chuckled, but it was a hollow sound. A lot can change in a year. Victoria's eyes narrowed, picking up on his tension. What's wrong? And don't tell me it's nothing. I've known you too long for that. For a moment, Gabriel considered brushing off her concern, but he realized he needed allies now more than ever. Let's talk in my office. Once the door was closed behind them, Gabriel filled Victoria in on the situation with Joey Caruso. As he spoke, he could see the concern growing in her eyes. Gabriel, she said when he'd finished, this is serious. If this Caruso character decides to make trouble, it could undo everything we've accomplished. The media would have a field day if they found out you were being threatened by someone from your past. I know, Gabriel said, sinking into his chair. But what can we do? We can't go to the police, that would just bring attention to the whole situation. Victoria paced the office, her mind clearly working overtime. We need a plan, a way to neutralize this threat without risking our reputation or the safety of the people we're trying to help. As they brainstormed potential solutions, a knock on the office door interrupted them. It was Emma Hansen, looking uncharacteristically flustered. Gabriel, I'm sorry to barge in, but we have a situation at the community center, she said, her voice tight with worry. Someone broke in last night. Nothing was stolen, but, well, you should see for yourself. Gabriel and Victoria exchanged a look of alarm. Could this be connected to Joey Caruso, or was it just a coincidence? As they hurried out of Elysium and towards the community center, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that the carefully constructed bridge between his past and present was starting to crumble. The life he had built, the good he was trying to do, it all suddenly felt terrifyingly fragile. The community center came into view, and Gabriel's heart sank. Spray painted across the front of the building in angry red letters were the words, "Once a criminal, always a criminal." As they stood there staring at the hateful message, Gabriel felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Lily, her young face a mixture of confusion and determination. "Don't worry, Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We can fix this. We'll paint over it together just like you taught us. Bad words can't hurt us if we don't let them." Gabriel squeezed Lily's hand, drawing strength from her simple, profound wisdom. He looked at the faces around him. Victoria's steely resolve, Emma's quiet strength, the determined expressions of the community center staff and volunteers who had begun to gather. In that moment, Gabriel knew that whatever storm was coming, he wouldn't face it alone. The community he had helped to build would stand with him just as he had stood for them. As they began to organize a cleanup effort, Gabriel's phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "Got some info, meet me at the old spot ASAP. Things are worse than we thought." Gabriel stared at the message, a sense of foreboding washing over him. The past he had tried so hard to leave behind was catching up with him, threatening not just his own future, but the futures of all those who had come to depend on him. As he looked from the vandalized building to the hopeful faces around him, Gabriel knew he was standing at a crossroads. The choices he would make in the coming days would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of everything and everyone he had come to care about. The storm was gathering, and Gabriel Thornton would have to summon every ounce of courage, wisdom, and support he had gained on his journey if he hoped to weather it. The old riverside warehouse loomed before Gabriel, its dilapidated facade a stark reminder of the life he'd left behind. As he approached, he saw Alex pacing nervously near the entrance, his face etched with worry. "Glad you could make it," Alex said as Gabriel drew near. "We've got a serious problem on our hands." Gabriel nodded grimly. "Tell me everything." As they walked into the warehouse, Alex began to explain. "Joey's not working alone. He's teamed up with some of the old crew, guys who never made it out of the life. They're bitter, Gabe. They see what you've built, what we're trying to do now, and they want a piece of it." Gabriel's mind raced, thinking of Elysium, the community center, and all the people who now depended on him. What exactly are they planning? Alex's expression darkened. "They're talking about exposing everything, Gabe. Not just your past, but details about the jobs we pulled, names of people we worked with. They're threatening to go to the media, the police, even some of your high-end clients. Gabriel felt his stomach drop. That could destroy everything we've worked for. The restaurant, the charity programs, it would all come crashing down. That's not even the worst of it, Alex continued, his voice low. They've been watching the community center. They know about Lily, about how important she is to you. They're talking about using her to get to you. A cold fury swept through Gabriel. If they so much as touch her— I know, Alex cut in. We won't let it come to that, but we need a plan, and fast. As they discussed their options, weighing the risks and potential consequences of each course of action, Gabriel's phone buzzed. It was a message from Victoria. "Where are you? Emma's here with Lily. The little girl's pretty shaken up after the vandalism. She's asking for you." Gabriel showed the message to Alex, conflict evident on his face. "Go," Alex said firmly. "Those kids need you. I'll keep digging, see if I can find a way to neutralize this threat without anyone getting hurt." Gabriel clasped Alex's shoulder. "Be careful. And Alex, thank you for everything." As Gabriel rushed back to Elysium, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. He knew he had to protect Lily and the other children, but he also couldn't let his past destroy the future he was trying to build for all of them. Entering Elysium, Gabriel found Victoria, Emma, and Lily waiting in his office. The little girl's eyes were red-rimmed, but she managed a small smile when she saw him. "Mr. Thornton," Lily said, her voice quavering slightly. "Why would someone write those mean things? Don't they know about all the good things we're doing?" Gabriel knelt down beside her, his heart aching. "Sometimes, Lily, people do bad things because they're scared or angry. They don't understand that hurting others doesn't make their own pain go away." As he comforted Lily, Gabriel caught Victoria's eye. She nodded slightly, understanding the unspoken message. They needed to talk, urgently. After Emma had taken Lily home, promising her that everything would be all right, Victoria turned to Gabriel. "All right, what's really going on? And don't even think about sugarcoating it." Gabriel sank into his chair, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He filled Victoria in on everything Alex had told him, watching as her expression shifted from concern to outright alarm. "Gabriel," she said when he'd finished, "this is beyond serious. We need to consider going to the authorities." "And risk everything we've built," Gabriel countered. "If this gets out, it won't just be me who suffers. The restaurant, the community programs, all the people who depend on us now, it would all fall apart." Victoria paced the office, her mind clearly racing. There has to be another way. What if we got ahead of the story, controlled the narrative ourselves? Gabriel considered this. "You mean come clean about everything before Joey and his crew can expose us?" "It's risky," Victoria admitted. "We'd take a hit, no doubt, but it might be better than waiting for the axe to fall. And it would show that we're committed to honesty and transparency, even when it's difficult." As they debated the pros and cons of this approach, a soft knock interrupted them. It was Emma, looking troubled. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, "but I couldn't help overhearing. Gabriel, whatever you decide to do, please remember that you're not alone in this. The community you've helped build, we're here for you too." Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at the two women before him, then at the photos on his desk. Snapshots of smiling children from the community center, the Elysium staff gathered at the charity gala, Lily beaming proudly after her first cooking lesson. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "We control the narrative, but we do it my way. Victoria, I need you to set up a press conference. Emma, can you gather the community center staff and our key supporters? It's time for me to tell the whole truth, not just the sanitized version I shared at the gala." As Victoria and Emma left to make the necessary arrangements, Gabriel turned to his computer. He had a statement to prepare, one that would lay bare every dark secret, every mistake, every step of his journey from troubled youth to community leader. He knew the risks were enormous. He could lose everything he'd worked so hard to build. But as he began to type, Gabriel felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. For the first time in his life, He was choosing to face his past head-on, not out of fear or coercion, but because it was the right thing to do. As the sun began to set outside his office window, casting long shadows across the city he'd come to love, Gabriel Thornton prepared to take the biggest gamble of his life. Tomorrow, he would stand before the world and bare his soul, hoping that the truth, in all its messy, complicated glory, would be enough to save the future he dreamed of. Not just for himself, but for Lily, for the community, and for all those who had dared to believe in second chances. Little did he know that his decision would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge him in ways he could never have imagined, testing the very foundations of the new life he had built and the relationships he had forged along the way. The morning of the press conference dawned grey and overcast, as if the city itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Gabriel stood before the mirror in his office at Elysium, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him, making each breath feel like a monumental effort. A soft knock on the door broke through his reverie. It was Victoria, her usual composed demeanor tinged with concern. "It's time, Gabriel," she said softly. "Are you sure about this?" Gabriel met her gaze in the mirror, seeing his own mix of fear and determination reflected in her eyes. "I'm sure it's the only way." As they made their way to the restaurant's main dining room, now transformed into an impromptu press area, Gabriel's mind raced through all the possible outcomes of what he was about to do. Would his honesty be enough? Or would it be the final nail in the coffin of everything he'd worked so hard to build? The room fell silent as Gabriel took his place at the podium. Before him, a sea of faces, journalists with pens poised, community members watching with a mix of curiosity and concern, and in the back, Alex, standing protectively near Lily and her mother. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel began to speak. "Good morning, thank you all for coming. I've asked you here today because I have a story to tell. It's not an easy story, and it's certainly not a pretty one. But it's the truth, the whole truth, about who I am and where I come from." As Gabriel delved into his past, holding nothing back, the room remained eerily silent. He spoke of his troubled youth, of the mistakes he'd made, of the lives he'd impacted. He detailed the fateful night that had led to his decision to leave his old life behind, not sparing himself in the recounting of his cowardice and the consequences others had faced because of his actions. "I stand before you today not as a self-made success story," Gabriel continued, his voice strong despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him, "but as a man who was given a second chance, a chance I didn't deserve, but one I've tried every day since to honor." He went on to explain how his encounter with Lily had awakened something in him, reminding him of the debts he still owed to the community he'd left behind. He spoke of the programs at Elysium and the community center, not as achievements to boast about, but as small steps towards making amends for the harm he'd caused in his youth. As Gabriel neared the end of his statement, he caught sight of Joey Caruso slipping into the back of the room, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "I know that there are those who believe I don't deserve the life I've built," Gabriel said, looking directly at Joey. "And perhaps they're right, but I stand here today not asking for forgiveness or understanding. I'm here to take responsibility for my past and to make a promise to continue working every day to be worthy of the trust this community has placed in me." The silence that followed Gabriel's final words was deafening. For a moment it seemed as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting to see how this revelation would be received. Then, from the back of the room, a small voice piped up. "Mr. Thornton?" It was Lily, her young face a mixture of confusion and admiration. "Does this mean you're like the people in the stories you read to us? The ones who made mistakes but then became heroes?" A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat as he looked at Lily, seeing in her eyes the unconditional acceptance he had never dared hope for. "I don't know about being a hero, Lily," he said softly, "but I'm trying to be better, to do better." As if Lily's words had broken a spell, the room suddenly erupted into a flurry of activity. Journalists shouted questions, community members began to talk amongst themselves, and in the midst of it all, Gabriel saw Joey Caruso slip out of the room, a conflicted look on his face. Victoria stepped up to the podium, deftly fielding questions and guiding the conversation. Gabriel found himself surrounded by a mix of supporters and skeptics, each with their own reactions to his revelations. Emma Hansen made her way through the crowd, her face etched with a mixture of concern and pride. "That was incredibly brave, Gabriel," she said, squeezing his arm. "Whatever happens next, know that you've set a powerful example for the children and for all of us." As the press conference wound down, Gabriel felt emotionally drained but strangely liberated. He had laid bare his darkest secrets, and while he knew there would be consequences to face, the weight of deception had been lifted from his shoulders. Later that evening, as Gabriel sat alone in his office, trying to process the events of the day, a knock on the door startled him. It was Alex, looking uncharacteristically serious. "You did good, Gabe," he said, closing the door behind him. "But we're not out of the woods yet. Joey's gone to ground, and some of the old crew are making noise. They're not happy about you airing all the dirty laundry." Gabriel nodded, the brief sense of relief he'd felt giving way to renewed worry. "What do you think they'll do?" Alex shrugged. "Hard to say. But whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this anymore, remember?" As Alex left, Gabriel turned to look out the window at the city skyline. He had taken a massive risk today, and the full repercussions were yet to be felt. But as he watched the lights of the city twinkle in the gathering darkness, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had told the truth, faced his past head-on. Whatever came next, he would face it with the strength of the community he had built, the friends he had made, and the lessons he had learned along the way. As he prepared to leave the office, Gabriel's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made his blood run cold. "Nice speech, Gabe, but you forgot to mention a few things. Meet me at the old spot tomorrow night if you want to keep the rest of your secrets buried. Come alone, or the little girl gets a front row seat to your real past." Gabriel stared at the message, his mind racing. Just when he thought he had laid all his cards on the table, it seemed the game had changed once again. As he contemplated his next move, Gabriel realized that the true test of his redemption was only just beginning. The day after the press conference was a whirlwind of activity. Gabriel's phone rang incessantly, with calls from journalists seeking follow-up interviews, concerned business associates, and a mix of supportive and angry messages from the community. Through it all, the threatening text message weighed heavily on his mind. As evening approached, Gabriel found himself pacing the floor of his office at Elysium, debating his next move. The logical part of him knew he should involve the police, or at least confide in Victoria and Alex, but the part of him that still carried the street-smart instincts of his youth warned against it. Whoever had sent that message clearly had information that could still hurt him, and more importantly, endanger Lily. A knock on the door interrupted his troubled thoughts. It was Emma Hansen, her face etched with concern. "Gabriel," she said, stepping into the office. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to check in on you after yesterday. How are you holding up?" Gabriel forced a smile, trying to mask his inner turmoil. "I'm fine, Emma. Just dealing with the aftermath. How are things at the community center?" Emma's expression softened. "It's been interesting. Some parents are concerned, of course, but many are incredibly supportive. They see your honesty as a powerful example for the children, especially Lily. She's been telling everyone that you're her hero." At the mention of Lily's name, Gabriel felt a pang of fear. The threat against her loomed large in his mind. That's great," he managed, his voice strained. "Listen, Emma, I hate to cut this short, but I have some urgent business to attend to. Can we catch up tomorrow?" Emma nodded, though her brow furrowed with worry. "Of course, but Gabriel, remember, you don't have to face all of this alone. We're here for you, all of us." As Emma left, Gabriel checked his watch. It was almost time. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, nearly colliding with Victoria in the hallway. "Gabriel, where are you rushing off to?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. "We have that meeting with the board in an hour to discuss damage control strategies." Gabriel hesitated, torn between his responsibility to the restaurant and the urgent need to protect Lily and his remaining secrets. I have to take care of something personal, Victoria. Can you handle the board meeting without me? I trust your judgment completely." Victoria's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Gabriel, what's going on? You've been on edge all day. Is there something you're not telling me?" For a moment, Gabriel considered confiding in her, but the memory of the threatening message held him back. "It's nothing, Victoria. Just some loose ends I need to tie up after yesterday's revelations. I'll fill you in later, I promise." Before Victoria could press further, Gabriel hurried out of the restaurant and into the chilly night air. As he hailed a taxi, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. But with Lily's safety on the line, he felt he had no choice. The taxi wound its way through the city streets, leaving behind the gleaming skyscrapers of the business district for the grittier neighborhoods of Gabriel's youth. As they approached the Old Spot, an abandoned lot where he and his crew used to meet, Gabriel's heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination. Stepping out of the taxi, Gabriel scanned the area, his senses on high alert. The lot was eerily quiet, shadows stretching long in the dim light of a single flickering street lamp. As he moved deeper into the lot, a figure emerged from behind a crumbling wall. "Hello, Gabe," a familiar voice drawled. "Long time no see." Gabriel's blood ran cold as he recognized the speaker. It was Mickey the Ghost Donovan, a notorious fixer from his old neighborhood. Mickey had always operated in the shadows, cleaning up messes for those who could pay and making problems disappear, often permanently. "Mickey," Gabriel acknowledged, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I should have known it'd be you. What's this all about?" Mickey stepped closer, his weathered face half hidden in shadow. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest with your little confession, Gabe. There are people who aren't too happy about you dredging up the past. People who stand to lose a lot if certain details come to light." Gabriel's mind raced, trying to piece together what Mickey was implying. "What details? I told the truth about everything." Mickey's laugh was cold and humorless. "Not everything, Gabe. You left out the part about that night at the docks. The night that made you run and never look back. Ring any bells?" Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The night at the docks, a job that was supposed to be a simple hijacking but had gone horribly wrong. Gabriel had fled the scene, but he'd always assumed that Mickey had taken care of any loose ends. Now it seemed those loose ends were coming back to haunt him. "What do you want, Mickey?" Gabriel asked, his voice low and dangerous. Mickey's eyes glinted in the dim light. "It's not about what I want, Gabe. It's about what certain interested parties want. They're willing to let bygones be bygones. Keep that little incident buried forever. All you have to do is walk away from this whole redemption act. Close down your fancy restaurant, shut down the community programs, and disappear. Simple as that." Gabriel felt a surge of anger. "And if I refuse?" Mickey shrugged, his casual demeanor at odds with the threat in his words. "Then maybe some new evidence comes to light. Evidence that ties you, and that sweet little girl you've been mentoring, to some very nasty business. It'd be a shame to see all your hard work crumble, wouldn't it?" As the full weight of Mickey's threat sank in, Gabriel realized he was trapped. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, was hanging by a thread. And that thread was in the hands of a man who had no qualms about destroying lives to protect his client's interests. "I'll need time to think about this," Gabriel said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Mickey nodded, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Take all the time you need, but not too much time. We wouldn't want any accidents to happen while you're making up your mind." As Mickey melted back into the shadows, Gabriel stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. He had thought that by confessing his past, he had freed himself from its grip. Now, he realized, he had only scratched the surface of the darkness that still lurked beneath. Walking back towards the main road, Gabriel's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Lily. "Mr. Thornton, guess what? I got an A on my math test. You were right, I can do anything if I believe in myself. Thank you for always believing in me." The innocent message hit Gabriel like a physical blow. How could he walk away from Lily, from all the children who were just beginning to believe in themselves? But how could he risk their safety by defying Mickey and his shadowy employers? As Gabriel hailed another taxi, his mind raced with possible solutions, each seeming more impossible than the last. He had faced challenges before, had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. But this felt different. This felt like a choice between two unbearable options. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Gabriel back towards the bright lights of the city center. But as he watched the familiar landmarks pass by, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that he was heading not towards home, but towards a crossroads that would define not just his future, but the futures of all those who had come to depend on him. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the city lights blurred outside the taxi window, Gabriel Thornton steeled himself for the fight of his life, a fight not just for his own redemption, but for the very soul of the community he had come to love. The following morning found Gabriel in his office at Elysium, surrounded by stacks of papers and a half-empty pot of coffee. He had barely slept, his mind racing with the implications of Mickey's threat and the impossible choice before him. A gentle knock on the door broke through his troubled thoughts. It was Victoria, her usual composed demeanor tinged with obvious concern. "Gabriel," she said, stepping into the office, "we need to talk. You've been avoiding everyone since the press conference, and after you missed the board meeting last night, what's going on?" For a moment, Gabriel considered brushing her off again, but the weight of his burden suddenly felt too heavy to bear alone. With a deep sigh, he gestured for Victoria to take a seat and began to explain everything. The threatening message, his meeting with Mickey, and the terrible choice he now faced. As he spoke, Victoria's expression shifted from concern to shock, and then to a steely determination. When Gabriel finished, she leaned forward, her eyes blazing with intensity. "Gabriel," she said firmly, "you can't seriously be considering giving in to these threats. Everything we've built, everything we stand for, you can't just throw that away." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "What choice do I have, Victoria? If I don't do what they want, they'll destroy everything anyway. And worse, they'll drag Lily into it. I can't let that happen." Victoria stood up and began to pace the office. "There has to be another way. What if we went to the authorities? Surely with your public confession and this new threat, they'd be willing to offer some kind of protection." Gabriel shook his head. "It's too risky. Mickey has connections everywhere. If he gets even a hint that we're involving the police, there's no telling what he might do." As they debated potential solutions, each seeming more impossible than the last, another knock interrupted them. This time it was Alex, his face grim. "Sorry to barge in," he said, closing the door behind him, "but we've got a situation. Word spreading on the street about your meeting with Mickey last night. Some of the kids at the community center are starting to ask questions. They're scared, Gabe." Gabriel felt his heart sink. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. The ripple effects of his past threatening to undo all the good they had accomplished. "What are people saying?" Victoria asked, her businesslike tone belying the worry in her eyes. Alex shrugged. "Mostly rumors and speculation, but there's talk about the community center being connected to some old criminal activities. Some parents are talking about pulling their kids out of the programs." The three of them fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. It was Lily's face that kept flashing in Gabriel's mind, her trust, her hope, her belief in the power of second chances. Suddenly Gabriel stood up, a new resolve settling over him. "No," he said firmly, "I won't let it end like this. We've come too far, helped too many people to let it all fall apart now." Victoria and Alex exchanged a surprised look. "What are you thinking?" Alex asked cautiously. Gabriel's mind was racing, pieces of a plan starting to fall into place. "Mickey thinks he has all the cards, that he can scare us into submission, but he's forgetting something important, the power of the truth." He turned to Victoria. "You said our social media engagement has been through the roof since the press conference, right? People are interested in redemption stories, in seeing real change in action." Victoria nodded slowly, beginning to see where Gabriel was going. "Yes, but how does that help us against Mickey's threats?" "We beat him at his own game," Gabriel explained, energy infusing his voice. "We don't hide from the truth. We embrace it, all of it. We hold another press conference, but this time, we don't just talk about my past, we expose the entire system that allowed people like Mickey to operate." Alex's eyes widened. "Gabe, that's incredibly dangerous. You'd be painting a target on your back." Gabriel nodded grimly. "I know, but it might be our only chance. If we can shine a light on everything, the corruption, the cover-ups, all of it, It'll be harder for Mickey and his employers to operate in the shadows. As they discussed the risks and potential consequences of this bold move, Gabriel felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. He knew he was proposing something that could backfire spectacularly, that could put everything and everyone he cared about at risk. But he also knew deep in his bones that it was the right thing to do. "We'll need help," Victoria said, her practical nature asserting itself. "Legal counsel, security, media management, this has to be handled carefully." Alex nodded in agreement. "I've still got some contacts from the old days who've gone straight. People who might be willing to corroborate your story, maybe even provide some additional evidence." As they began to hash out the details of their daring plan, Gabriel's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Emma Hansen. "Gabriel, something's wrong. Lily didn't show up for her tutoring session, and her mother can't reach her. Please call me back as soon as you can." Gabriel felt his blood run cold. He showed the message to Victoria and Alex, watching as their faces paled in realization. "Mickey," Alex growled. "He must have found out we were planning something." Gabriel's mind raced with terrible possibilities. Had Mickey decided to make good on his threats? Was Lily in danger because of him? As the gravity of the situation sank in, Gabriel knew that their plan, as risky as it had seemed before, was now their only option. They had to act fast, had to bring everything into the light before it was too late. "Alex," Gabriel said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Call your contacts, get every piece of evidence, every witness you can find. Victoria, start setting up the press conference. For today, if possible. I'm going to find Lily." As they sprang into action, Gabriel felt a fierce determination overtake his fear. He had started down this path of redemption for Lily, for all the children who deserved a chance at a better life. He wouldn't let the shadows of his past destroy their future. Walking out of Elysium, Gabriel Thornton steeled himself for the battle ahead. He didn't know exactly what Mickey had planned or how this desperate gamble would play out. But he knew one thing for certain. He would face whatever came next head-on with the full force of the truth behind him. The final showdown was approaching, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As Gabriel headed out into the city, determined to find Lily and put an end to Mickey's threats once and for all, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had worked for, everything he believed in, would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. The truth had set him free once before. Now he could only hope it would be enough to save not just him, but all those who had come to depend on him. The city streets blurred past as Gabriel's car sped through traffic, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. His mind raced even faster than the vehicle, replaying every interaction he'd had with Mickey, searching for clues about where he might have taken Lily. His phone buzzed incessantly with updates from Victoria and Alex. The press conference was set for 6 p.m., just 4 hours away. Alex's contacts were coming through with evidence, but it was a race against time to verify and organize everything. As Gabriel pulled up to Lily's apartment building, he saw Emma Hansen pacing anxiously outside. Her face lit up with a mix of relief and worry when she spotted him. "Gabriel, thank goodness you're here. There's still no word from Lily or her mother. I've called everyone I can think of, but no one's seen them since yesterday afternoon." Gabriel's heart sank. "Have you contacted the police?" Emma nodded, wringing her hands. "They said they can't do anything until she's been missing for 24 hours. But I know something's wrong, Gabriel. This isn't like Lily or her mother at all." As they talked, Gabriel's phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "Tick-tock, Gabe. Time's running out for your little friend. Still think telling the truth is a good idea?" Gabriel's blood ran cold. He showed the message to Emma, watching as her face paled in realization. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Gabriel, what's going on? Who would do this?" Gabriel took a deep breath, knowing he owed Emma the truth. Quickly, he filled her in on the situation with Mickey and the impending press conference. Emma listened, her expression shifting from shock to determination. "We need to find her, Gabriel, whatever it takes." Just then, Gabriel's phone rang. It was Alex. "Gabe, I think I've got something. One of my old contacts remembers Mickey using an abandoned warehouse down by the docks for special jobs. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got," Gabriel finished. He turned to Emma. I'm going to check it out. Can you head back to the community center? If Lily manages to get away or contact anyone, that's where she'll go." Emma nodded, her face set with resolve. "Be careful, Gabriel, and bring her back safe." As Gabriel sped towards the docks, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt warred with determination, fear with hope. He had dragged Lily into this mess, and now her life was in danger because of his past. But he was also the only one who could make this right. The docks loomed ahead, a maze of shipping containers and dilapidated buildings. Gabriel parked his car and proceeded on foot, his senses on high alert. The warehouse Alex had mentioned stood at the far end of the complex, its windows dark and broken. As Gabriel approached, he heard a muffled sound from inside. His heart racing, he crept closer, peering through a grimy window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Lily and her mother were there, tied to chairs in the center of the room. Mickey paced around them, talking on his phone in hushed, angry tones. Two other men, heavily built and clearly armed, stood guard by the door. Gabriel's mind raced. He was outnumbered and unarmed. Charging in would be suicide. But he couldn't just leave Lily and her mother in there. Time was running out. Just then his phone vibrated. It was Victoria. "Gabriel, where are you? The press is starting to arrive for the conference. We need you here." Gabriel's heart sank. The press conference, their plan to expose everything and neutralize Mickey's threats. But how could he go through with it while Lily was in danger? As he stood there, torn between his responsibilities and his desperate need to save Lily, Gabriel realized that this was the moment that would define not just his future, but the kind of man he truly was. With shaking hands, he dialed 911. As he waited for the operator to pick up, Gabriel Thornton made the hardest decision of his life. He would trust in the truth, in the plan they had set in motion. He would go to the press conference and lay everything bare, trusting that the exposure would force Mickey's hand and bring help for Lily. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice came through. Gabriel took a deep breath. I need to report a kidnapping. As he gave the details to the operator, Gabriel's resolve strengthened. He would do everything in his power to save Lily, but he wouldn't do it alone. He would trust in the community he had built, in the power of the truth to bring light to even the darkest corners. Casting one last agonized look at the warehouse, Gabriel turned and ran back to his car. The press conference awaited, and with it, the final showdown that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of Lily, the community center, and everything he had worked to build. As he sped back towards the city center, Gabriel sent up a silent prayer. He had put his faith in second chances, in the power of redemption. Now he could only hope that faith would be strong enough to see them through this darkest of hours. The lights of the press conference were blinding as Gabriel stepped up to the podium. The room was packed, a sea of expectant faces and cameras ready to capture every word. In the front row, he could see Victoria and Alex, their expressions a mix of support and barely concealed worry. Gabriel's heart raced, knowing that every second he spent here was a second Lily remained in danger. But he also knew that this was their best chance to end Mickey's reign of terror once and for all. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. A few days ago I stood before you and shared the story of my past, of the mistakes I'd made and the journey of redemption I'd undertaken. But today I'm here to tell you that that was only part of the story. A murmur ran through the crowd. Gabriel pressed on, his voice gaining strength. The truth is, there are forces at work in this city that don't want the full story to come to light. Forces that profit from keeping people down, from denying second chances to those who need them most. As Gabriel spoke, detailing the corruption and criminal activities that had plagued the city for years, he could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of the reporters. He named names, provided dates and locations, laid bare the entire network of corruption that Mickey and his employers had built. I stand before you today not just as a man seeking redemption, but as a witness to the rot that has infected our city. And I am not alone. On cue, Alex stepped forward, bringing with him a group of individuals, former gang members, ex-cons, and even a few reformed corrupt officials. One by one, they took the microphone, corroborating Gabriel's story and adding their own testimonies. As the press conference progressed, Gabriel's phone buzzed in his pocket. Fighting to maintain his composure, he glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "You're making a big mistake, Thornton. Say goodbye to your little friend." Gabriel's heart nearly stopped. He looked to Victoria, giving her a subtle nod. It was time for the final phase of their plan. Victoria stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news. We have reason to believe that a young girl named Lily, a student at the Oakwood Community Center, has been kidnapped in retaliation for Mr. Thornton's decision to come forward with this information." A gasp ran through the crowd. Cameras flashed as Victoria continued, providing details about Lily and the suspected location of her captivity. "We are calling on the authorities and the good people of this city to help us bring Lily home safely. This is bigger than just one man's redemption. This is about the soul of our community." As Victoria spoke, Gabriel's phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. "Gabriel, the police are here. They're heading to the warehouse now." A wave of relief washed over Gabriel, but he knew they weren't out of the woods yet. He stepped back to the podium, his face set with determination. "I know that by coming forward like this, I'm putting myself at risk. But I also know that the only way to truly change things is to bring them into the light. I'm done running from my past. I'm done letting fear control my actions." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "To those who would threaten innocent lives to protect their power, I say this: your time is up. We, the people of this city, will no longer stand idly by while you prey on the vulnerable and crush the hopes of those seeking a second chance." As Gabriel continued to speak, laying out his vision for a city free from corruption and full of opportunity for all, he could see the impact his words were having. Reporters were frantically taking notes, cameras were rolling, and social media was exploding with live updates. Suddenly there was a commotion at the back of the room. Gabriel's heart leapt as he saw Emma pushing through the crowd, a small figure clutched tightly in her arms. "Lily!" Gabriel cried out, forgetting the microphone and the cameras as he rushed to meet them. Lily looked up, her face tear-stained but her eyes bright with relief. "Mr. Thornton, you saved us." As Gabriel embraced Lily and her mother, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and in the midst of it all, Gabriel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned back to the podium, Lily's hand clasped tightly in his. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we fight. This is why we must never give up on the power of truth and second chances. Lily is safe thanks to the brave actions of our police force and the strength of our community." As Gabriel fielded questions from the press, explaining how the police had managed to rescue Lily and apprehend Mickey and his men, he could see the story taking shape. It wasn't just about his redemption anymore. It was about a city coming together to fight corruption, about the power of truth to overcome even the darkest of forces. Hours later, as the press conference finally wound down, Gabriel found himself surrounded by his closest allies. Victoria, Alex, Emma, and Lily all looked exhausted, but triumphant. "We did it," Alex said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We actually did it." Gabriel nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "It's just the beginning," he said. "There's still so much work to do." As they left the conference room, stepping out into the cool night air, Gabriel felt a tugging on his sleeve. It was Lily, her young face serious. "Mr. Thornton," she said softly, "are the bad men gone now? Can we go back to our normal lives?" Gabriel knelt down, meeting Lily's gaze. "The bad men are going away for a long time, Lily. And yes, we can go back to our lives, but I hope they'll be even better than before. Because now we know how strong we are when we stand together and tell the truth." Lily smiled, throwing her arms around Gabriel's neck. "You're my hero, Mr. Thornton. You and Miss Emma and everyone who helped save me." As Gabriel returned Lily's hug, he looked up at the faces of those around him, Victoria with her unwavering support, Alex with his hard-won wisdom, Emma with her compassionate strength. He realized that they were all heroes in their own way, all part of the redemption story that had started with one act of kindness on a rainy night. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be trials and challenges as they worked to root out the remaining corruption and build a truly inclusive community. But as Gabriel stood there, surrounded by his newfound family, he knew that whatever came next, They would face it together. The truth had set them free, and in that freedom, they had found the strength to change not just their own lives, but the very fabric of the city they called home. In the weeks following the dramatic press conference and Lily's rescue, the city underwent a transformation that few could have predicted. The exposure of the corruption network sent shockwaves through every level of society, from the highest echelons of power to the streets Gabriel had once called home. As the dust began to settle, Gabriel found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Elysium had become more than just a restaurant. It was now a symbol of redemption and community activism. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities. One crisp autumn morning, Gabriel stood in the newly renovated community center, surveying the bustling activity around him. The place was alive with energy, children engrossed in after-school programs, adults attending job training workshops, and volunteers bustling about. Quite a change, isn't it? Emma's voice came from behind him, warm with pride. Gabriel nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. It's more than I ever dared to hope for. As they walked through the center, Gabriel marveled at the transformations. The old reading nook had expanded into a full library, stocked with books donated by local businesses and community members. The kitchen, once barely functional, now gleamed with new equipment, hosting cooking classes for both children and adults. Mr. Thornton, Mr. Thornton. Lily's excited voice cut through the bustle. She came running up, waving a paper in her hand. Look, I got an A on my history test. Gabriel knelt down, examining the test paper with exaggerated seriousness. This is excellent work, Lily. You should be very proud. Lily beamed, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. I used some of the stories you told us about the old days to help me remember the dates. Don't worry, I didn't tell anyone where I really learned it. As Lily scampered off to show her test to her friends, Gabriel felt a warmth spread through his chest. The past that had once been a source of shame had become a tool for education and growth. Later that day, Gabriel found himself back at Elysium, overseeing the preparations for a special event. The restaurant was hosting a fundraiser dinner for the community center, bringing together donors, community leaders, and families who had benefited from the programs. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror of his office, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Gabriel, she said, stepping into the room, there's someone here to see you. I think you should talk to them before the event starts. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Gabriel followed Victoria to a quiet corner of the restaurant. There, looking older and more careworn than he remembered, stood Joey the Shark Caruso. For a moment, the two men simply stared at each other, years of history hanging between them. Then Joey spoke, his voice gruff with emotion. Gabe, Mr. Thornton, I heard about what you've been doing here. With the kids and all. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. I was wondering if there might be a place for someone like me in your programs. To help out or something. Gabriel felt a mix of emotions wash over him, surprise, caution, and a glimmer of hope. He studied Joey's face, seeing not the tough enforcer he once knew, but a man seeking his own shot at redemption. It won't be easy, Joey, Gabriel said slowly. There's a lot of trust to rebuild, a lot of work to do. Joey nodded, a flicker of determination in his eyes. I know, but if you could do it, maybe I can too. I'm willing to try if you'll give me a chance. As Gabriel extended his hand to Joey, he felt the weight of his own journey settle on him. He had been given a second chance, and now he had the power to offer that same opportunity to others. The fundraiser that night was a rousing success. As Gabriel looked out over the crowd, a mix of wealthy donors, community members, and familiar faces from his past, he felt a sense of awe at how far they had all come. In his speech, Gabriel spoke not just of the community center's achievements, but of the power of second chances and the strength found in unity. As he talked about the future, expanded programs, new initiatives, and dreams of replicating their success in other neighborhoods, he could see the spark of inspiration in the eyes of those listening. As the evening wound down, Gabriel found a quiet moment with Alex, both of them watching the diverse crowd mingle and chat. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Alex asked, shaking his head in wonder. Gabriel chuckled softly. Never in a million years, but I'm glad we did. As they stood there reflecting on their journey, Gabriel realized that the story of redemption he had started was far from over. It was evolving, growing, touching more lives than he could have ever imagined. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as Gabriel looked around at the community he had helped build, a community of second chances, of hope and of unwavering support, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The night was ending, but for Gabriel Thornton and the city he had come to love, it felt like the dawn of a new era, one of redemption, unity, and limitless possibility. 5 years had passed since the night of the press conference that had changed everything. The city had transformed in ways that once seemed impossible, and at the heart of that change stood Elysium and the Oakwood Community Center. On a warm spring evening, Gabriel Thornton stood on the rooftop garden of Elysium, overlooking the bustling city below. The restaurant had evolved, much like its owner. While it still served exquisite meals to discerning patrons, it had also become a training ground for aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds. The sound of laughter drew Gabriel's attention. A group of teenagers was tending to the rooftop vegetable garden, part of Elysium's farm-to-table program. Among them he spotted a familiar face, Lily, now a confident young woman of 12, expertly instructing her peers on the finer points of herb cultivation. "Mr. Thornton," Lily called out, waving him over, "come see the basil we planted last month. It's coming in beautifully." As Gabriel joined the group, marveling at the lush greenery they had coaxed from the urban rooftop, he felt a sense of pride that went beyond anything he had achieved in his business career. These young people, once considered at risk, were now the rising stars of their community. Later that evening, as the last of the dinner service wound down, Gabriel made his way to the community center for a special event. The building, once dilapidated and forgotten, now stood as a beacon of hope in the neighborhood. Inside, the main hall was packed with familiar faces. Emma Hansen, her hair now streaked with gray but her eyes as bright as ever, was orchestrating the proceedings with her usual efficiency. Victoria, who had transitioned from running Elysium to overseeing the expansion of their programs to other cities, was deep in conversation with a group of business leaders. And there, manning the welcome table with a smile that still held a hint of his old mischief, was Alex. He had become an integral part of the center's operations, his street smarts and hard-won wisdom proving invaluable in connecting with troubled youth. As Gabriel made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging greetings, he was struck by the diversity of the gathering. Former gang members stood shoulder to shoulder with business executives. Children from the after-school programs mingled with university professors who volunteered their time. The occasion for the gathering was the launch of their most ambitious project yet, a citywide initiative to provide education, job training, and support for ex-offenders and at-risk youth. It was a program that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago, but now had the full backing of the city government and business community. As Gabriel stepped up to the podium to give his speech, he felt a moment of déjà vu. How many times had he stood before a crowd, bearing his soul and sharing his vision? But this time felt different. This time, he wasn't standing alone. 5 years ago, Gabriel began, his voice strong and clear, I stood before a different crowd and told the truth about my past. I thought that would be the end of my story. Instead, it was just the beginning. He went on to outline the journey they had all taken together, the challenges they had faced, the victories they had won, and the lives they had changed. As he spoke, he could see heads nodding, eyes shining with shared memories and shared purpose. But we're not here tonight to celebrate the past, Gabriel continued. We're here to look to the future, to commit ourselves to the idea that everyone deserves a second chance, that redemption is not just possible, but essential for the health of our community. As he introduced the new initiative, detailing the partnerships they had formed and the goals they had set, Gabriel could feel the energy in the room building. This wasn't just his dream anymore. It belonged to all of them. After the speech, as the crowd mingled and discussed the exciting new plans, Gabriel found a quiet moment with Lily. She was standing by a wall covered in photos, a visual history of the community center's journey. It's amazing, isn't it? Lily said. her eyes scanning the photos. "How much has changed? How many lives have been touched?" Gabriel nodded, following her gaze. There were photos of groundbreaking ceremonies, graduation celebrations, community cleanup days. And sprinkled throughout were faces he recognized, people who had started in their programs and gone on to become success stories in their own right. "You know," Lily continued, a thoughtful look on her face, "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do when I grow up." "Oh?" Gabriel said, curious. "And what have you decided?" Lily turned to him, her expression serious. "I want to do what you did, Mr. Thornton. I want to help people find their second chances. Maybe I could even run a place like this someday." Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, seeing in her the same determination and hope that had driven him all those years ago. "Lily," he said softly, "I have no doubt that you'll do exactly that. And you'll probably do it even better than we did." As the evening wound down, Gabriel found himself back on the rooftop of Elysium, looking out over the city he had come to love. The lights twinkled below, each one representing a life, a story, a potential for change. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a troubled youth to a successful but hollow businessman, to a man who had found his true purpose in lifting others up. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt and challenges that had seemed insurmountable, but standing there with the warm spring breeze on his face and the knowledge of all they had accomplished, Gabriel Thornton felt a sense of peace settle over him. The story of redemption he had started on a rainy night years ago had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. It had become a symphony of second chances, a testament to the power of truth, compassion, and unwavering hope. As he turned to head back inside, Gabriel paused for one last look at the city. The past could not be changed, but the future was full of endless possibilities. And tomorrow, just like every day for the past 5 years, he would wake up ready to make those possibilities a reality, not just for himself, but for all those who dared to believe in the power of a second chance. The end of one chapter, Gabriel realized, was just the beginning of another. And this story, the story of a community united in hope and purpose, was far from over. In fact, it was just getting started.